Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the what if. Number 15 hash. Flashback dream. Ichigo. What's wrong Rukia? Kurosaki Ichigo, 25 years old, he was already captain of Squad 8 at this time in the past, and had just returned from a suicidal mission in the front lines. His hair reached his mid-back and was loose, strands of hair coming into his eyes and not letting him take a good look of the raven-head midget he found kneeling next to a blossoming sakura tree. She had tears in her eyes, her cheeks were also stained with them and you could tell she had been here a long time, but when he came from behind and called her out, she suddenly launched herself on him into a tight grip, not even thinking of letting go of his shihakusho, only tightening her grip. Rukia, talk to me, what happened? Ichigo, Byakuya ni sama, Renji, they. Understanding right away, Ichigo only cradled her further into his chest, giving her comforting circles on her back and combing black hair with his hand, letting her cry all she needed in his chest and just be there for her like she had been there for him 1 year ago when he lost his sisters and everyone else. Who? The Segunda, Baragan Lusenbairn, he will pay for making Rooks cry. Flashback end. Ichigo woke up slightly confused. He remembered his dream very well, after all, it had been real, but the why he was dreaming of that moment now puzzled him slightly and he couldn't help but furrow his eyebrows in confusion. A small knock was heard before the shoji door opened slowly, revealing a kneeling servant on the other side of the door. Ichigo went into a sitting position and looked at her in small confusion. Good morning Ichigo-sama, your father has asked me to call you forth to join your family for breakfast. Thank you, you're dismissed. The servant gave a low bow and closed the door careful to not make much noise when closing it completely. Once she left Ichigo got back to his thinking, he was quite confused, he didn't remember going to bed, nor did he remember changing. The last thing he remembered was, Rukia. Remembering his act of selfishness and weakness from the day before he couldn't help but feel embarrassed, he had cried on her chest just like she did in her dream, she had played with his hair in soothing manner just like he did in the past. It made him understand why he had dreamed of that scene from the past and think that he would have to thank Rukia next time he saw her. After all, he had never slept a complete night and as such felt much better, and even more because his feelings weren't bottled up anymore. Deciding he needed to hurry up since he had a mission to do, he stood up from his futon, silently disagreeing with the fact that someone had changed him into his sleeping cloths without him noticing. He inwardly cursed at his stupidity, letting his guard down. He was getting soft if he was being this carefree, he had to blame it on Unohana's herbs. He changed in one of his many Shinigami Shihakushos and Haori. He brushed his hair to untangle it and noticed the cylinder ornament he had worn yesterday to tie his hair in a tail on his desk. He saw a letter near it and read it. Dear baby cousin, I found this the other day looking around all the things we had stored in the basement. It's one of the Shiba artifacts and is usually worn by higher-ups. Since you have such long hair and always tied up I thought you would like it. Sincerely, Kukaku Nessen. Ichigo scowled at the use of that nickname Kukaku sometimes used but brushed it off and mentally thanking her for entrusting him with such an old piece. He put it on, taking note this kind of thin reminded him of the Kenshiken the Kuchiki use with the exception that the golden piece is very discreet and is pretty normal, not really catching much attention but in its own way, very important to the Shibas. He left his room and followed the corridors in a silent walk to the dining room, wanting to eat and be on his way as soon as possible. It was not good to postpone this kind of things and he had postponed it long enough. He entered the room in such a concentrated state he had forgotten to add emotion to his face and sat down at the head of the table not even noticing that everyone was already there. He let out a sigh and pinched the bridge of his nose. This was going to be hard to explain to his family. What's wrong cousin? Ichigo jumped from his seat at hearing a voice. He glanced to the side to see all his family eyeing him with worried eyes and curious expressions. He went wide-eyed noticing he had just made the biggest mistake in the world, let his guard down and let his true emotions surface around the family, and that was the worst because he knew how protective Shibas were of family. Come on Ichigo spit it. Calm down Karen, I'm just trying to find the right words. Holding his hands up in defense he couldn't help but feel intimidated by the harsh scowls Kukaku and Karen were sending his way. They were too similar to be true. Well, The thing is, I'm going on a day-long mission. That's not a bad thing. There are longer missions, that can't be what's bothering you unless it's the details of the mission. Ichigo looked at his dad. The man had an unusual and serious face on. He catches up quick with what was going on and he knew he would protest once he mentioned where he was going. The thing is, I'll be going to Hueco Mundo, Al. I'm not letting you go to Hueco Mundo alone. Scowling at the overprotectiveness his dad had decided to show now and not when he was a teen, he put on a fierce gaze and let his well-restrained Ryutsu trickle away to show how determined he was, and it was not up for debate. I will go in a mission to gather information and I'm the only one that knows the place by heart. I'm not to engage in battle and I will leave after breakfast and be back tomorrow morning the latest. Seeing how determined Ichigo was, Isshin sighed and slumped back onto his seat in defeat. I'm not a kid anymore, nor am I in any way in danger by going. You'll come back, right, Oni-chan? Seeing Yuzu at the verge of tears, Ichigo couldn't restrain himself and patted her gently on the head. Of course I will, and if he doesn't I'll make sure to bring him back and kill him myself. So you better keep your promise, brat. Nodding in understanding and not trusting himself to replay without getting his cousin rage, he decided to stay silent and eat in peace. When they were finished eating, Ganju asked the girls to help him out with something to let Isshin and Kukaku talk with Ichigo. Ichigo, we have an arrangement and we need your acceptance before it's an official. Getting onto his serious and noble mode, seeing as it seemed to be something to do with the clan, he gazed at both adults in front of him. I imagine you made some sort of agreement yesterday with some noble family. That's right, and as head of the clan we can't finish a deal without your approval. I am well aware of that. And also aware of the fact that I will not only have to handle paperwork at my squad but also here. Kukaku nodded in affirmation. After all, just this morning a huge stack of propositions came in for Ichigo to analyze, accept or decline. Yes, but this one is needed to be attended as soon as possible. It's an arranged marriage with the Kuchiki's son, you and Rukia-chan. Ichigo sighed and massaged his temples in attempt to subside the upcoming headache that was sure to come with these two in his life and making agreements behind his back. Did Byakuya even agree in the first place? It was his idea. He was beyond surprised at that, but hid his surprise well behind his noble mask. This made Isshin and Kukaku sweat in fear at seeing the youngest of the family more serious than ever before, so composed and apparently unaffected by anything. He seemed nothing like the Ichigo they knew, nor something a Shiba would be able to do of acting so noble. I understand. Kukaku and Isshin went wide-eyed. He had just said he understood, like if it were nothing, like if he had absolutely nothing to do with it. I shall approve of the arrangement as long as Rukia does first. Anything she doesn't agree to I don't either. If she wants to wait for a while I will wait. If she doesn't want to I don't either, and if she wants to marry tomorrow then I will marry her tomorrow. And I want you and the Kuchikis to understand that I will stand at her side, not because it's an arranged marriage but because I really do care for her. Isshin couldn't help but feel proud of his son. He was taking it very well and he had not even lost his cold once. He had really grown up, and the time to worry about him is in the past, and that he can't fix his mistake, but he can always be there for him. Okay, we'll make sure to let the stuck-up bastards know. Letting his noble act down and letting a small smile grace his face and feel happy that he was actually going to marry Rukia. It was one of his dreams for when the war ended. Too bad it didn't end how everyone expected it to. Good. Oh, and I forgot to tell you. My mission is not common knowledge, so best not mention it. We'll take note of that. But no promises. Sighing at his father's stupid personality, he remembered something that had made him curious the moment he woke up. Just making sure, but I'm pretty sure I never got to bed yesterday, and I'm also sure I didn't drink yesterday either. The last thing I remember was about that. When I was walking around the halls to get some fresh air, I noticed Rukia-chan was leaning on the big maple tree, so I went to see what she was doing. And to my surprise I found you sleeping on her lap and her just passing fingers through your hair. So as a good daddy I am, I took the liberty to carry you to your room and change you. I don't know if I want to thank you or punch you for your sappy explanation. Don't be like that, Ichigo. It breaks daddy's heart. Rolling his eyes at Isshin's fake anime tears and usual banter, he stood up from his sitting position and stretched sore muscles back in place. He glanced back at his dad to ask him with a calm tone. How long will you guys stay here? A week. Nodding in understanding and not looking back, he exited the room and scurried his way to his quarters. Upon arriving, he grabbed both Zangetsu and Muramasa that were resting on a stand specially made for them. He put them both on his back and went towards the gate, ready to leave with newfound determination. He felt revived, more powerful than before, with determination to do what was right and not just go on autopilot. He had found his goal once more, and he'd be damned if he didn't fulfill it. Ichigo stepped out from the black abyss. The Garganta closed softly behind him and he stood imposingly on white endless sands, giving a small smile at the particular homey world. After all, he did stay the majority of his time in Hueco Mundo instead of Soul Society. He even had his own small barracks in a cave, with all the necessities. But of course, that's in the past now. Ichigo decided to restrain every bit of his Ryutsu just in case. He didn't want to be found, and this mission was of most importance to remain undetected. So when he was convinced he had masked his Ryutsu completely, he started to make way to the White Castle of Las Noches. Once entering the proximities of the castle, he saw something that made him stop. Ichigo widened in eyes at the sight before him. He never expected something of this magnitude, but only one person could be brought to mind when seeing something like this. Deciding that being surprised was just a waste of time, he decided to stray from his original plan of not contacting any of the Espada. He had to get as many as them on his side, but he knew only 2 would actually listen before a fight. And he also needed to find someone else, the more allies the merrier. So he decided on his change of plans and set them in motion, hoping that Yamamoto had listened to the advice he sent him before leaving via Hell Butterfly and had programmed a meeting upon his return. Number 15 Kuchiki Byakuya was pleased, because of course, he was never happy, he was just currently pleased with the current outcome. He had the 2 Shiba elders in front of him, notifying the decision the head had made. Even if the boy had emphasized very well of the first condition to accepting the arranged marriage, he didn't find it a problem at all. Why, you asked? Because he was not ignorant. Of course he acted like he was indifferent to his surroundings, but he was not clueless as to how Rukia felt about that boy, man, but either way, he was sure that the arrangement was a given the moment he had convinced the 2 in front of him. So now they were only waiting for Rukia, the one that would give the final decision, so as to say, even though he was 100% sure the marriage would happen sooner or later. There was a knock on the door signaling the arrival of the petite Shinigami, and she made her way inside once she was given permission from a cold and indifferent come in. Good morning. You called me Nisama. Yes, I did. These 2 are here to pass on a message concerning what I'm about to tell you, so listen well. Rukia took a seat and sat down patiently, even though the curiosity was killing her as to why Ichigo's dad and cousin were here, even though she knew her Nisama detested company from anyone Shiba related because they were too disrespectful. The Shibas and the Kuchikis want to make an arrangement between the 2 clans, and the way to show our good relationship and help our own interests is that we shall hold an arranged marriage. Rukia's eyes widened and she lost her noble and calm Kuchiki mask she had practiced for much time. She didn't know if what she was hearing was true. The arranged marriage is between the head of the Shiba clan, Shiba Ichigo, and yourself. But of course for something like this the head must approve it first, since there aren't any elders to force the marriage, and that's where these 2 come in. Isshin faced Rukia from where he was seated. He didn't have his usual goofy grin on, but he didn't have a serious expression either. He was calm since he knew very well what the outcome would be, but he rather avoid a pink tornado of flower petals than act all happy like always. We told Ichigo just this morning. He was pretty calm about it, looked like if he actually expected it or something. But the point is, he agreed but gave us a condition of some sort. I'll tell you his exact words, since I doubt I can explain it better myself. He said, I shall approve of the arrangement as long as Rukia does first. Anything she doesn't agree to I don't either. If she wants to wait for a while I will wait. If she doesn't want to I don't either, and if she wants to marry tomorrow then I will marry her tomorrow. And I want you and the Kuchikis to understand that I will stand at her side, not because it's an arranged marriage but because I really do care for her. Rukia was between having to hold her tears of joy and the smile that was creeping on her face. She was amazed that Ichigo had thought of her before anything, and that made the decision she had already made feel even more right and perfect. I shall accept as well. I really do appreciate the thought. Then it's decided. The arranged marriage is now official and will have to be started with the preparations immediately. Is that fine with you, Rukia? Yes, Ni-sama. Nodding in understanding, Rukia stood up and gave a mid-bow and left. She felt happy and nothing would make that happiness be ruined. She was actually going to get married with the person she loved, and the best of all was that Ichigo loved her too. Number 15 hash. 24 hours had already passed since Ichigo left, and there was a captain's meeting being held. Everyone stood patiently in place awaiting to see why they had been summoned, and most important of all, where was the new orange-haired captain? To be late on your first meeting was not good, but the surprising thing was that the Sotaicho had not even said a word concerning it. This is getting boring. What are we even waiting for? Patience, Zaraki Taicho. The meeting will be held once Shiba Taicho has arrived. Yamamoto's calm voice surprised even more some of the present. Why was he so uncaring when he was late? No offense, Yamaji, but you seem carefree about this. Opening slightly an eye to gaze at his most laid-back captain, he sighed and slumped his shoulders. Well, of course they would get impatient. They didn't even know the Orange Head had gone into Hueco Mundo for a mission. It's normal to be delayed on a mission, and more so one of that caliber. I wasn't informed the Fifth had a mission that the captain was needed to lead. These details are mostly always provided. That's because the mission he was sent on was won by my command, Soifun Taicho. Many were stunned. A mission that the Sotaicho ordered was not common at all. They were going to voice out their thoughts when a crack started to form in the air, right at the end of the lines of captains, directly in front of Yamamoto. Almost everyone recognized the crack as a garganta and entered defensive positions. They were about to release their Zanpakuto for precaution when Yamamoto's voice stopped them. Stop this at once. But the argument was stopped when Ichigo came walking out of the garganta with a little bundle in hands. He walked out of the garganta calmly, too calmly to be something good, noticed Yamamoto. Ichigo held a serious and emotionless gaze, and any insult that was going to be directed his way was stopped when they caught sight of his eyes that held no emotion, no life whatsoever, only hard determination. Report, Shiba Taicho. Yes, sir. Ichigo took a step forward, and in time with his step the garganta closed behind. He stood with the same emotionless face in front of everyone, and that more than anything made everyone get back in line and listen, not daring to move a muscle thanks to his eyes that sent chills down your spine. Yesterday, 24 hours 36 minutes ago to be exact, I entered Hueco Mundo as accorded by the mission. I immediately proceeded to gather information of the current state of the ranking Eisen left behind, and as such went towards Las Noches, the base of operation of the army Eisen had prepared. When arriving the proximities, I caught sight of many Numeros and Ijuka's class hollows. Apparently they are protecting the castle and acting as an army. I gathered information, and the one in charge, or the one that started the plan, was the Segunda Espada Barragan Luzenbairn. He is an Espada that has always considered himself king and is apparently gathering more hollows to strike against Soul Society. All were silent. They couldn't believe that Ichigo had just entered Hueco Mundo alone, like if it were his own personal playground. Others were amazed how he had entered undetected and had gained information. But the most important fact was that the hollows were joining to attack. What is your recommendation on this, Shiba Taicho? Extermination. Many were surprised by the coldness used in his voice, how he could possibly speak of something like that as if it were not inhuman and also hard. Ma, I doubt our problems would be solved if we just went and killed them all. That would just give them more reasons to hate us. I never said all of them, did I? Ichigo changed from a serious tone to a playful one, and that made many have chills at the current situation. Explain yourself. Ichigo glanced to the side, seeing Soifun speak up, like always losing her temper so easily. I never said extermination of what? When I said extermination, I was referring to the hollows that are guarding the castle. If we do that, it will be easier to access the Espada and take the dangerous ones down. I know exactly who is a threat and who isn't, those that need to be dead for there to be peace, those that need a beating to understand, and those that just needed a friendly talk. You're saying it as if you already had a friendly talk. Ichigo smirked at everyone's ignorance. Were they expecting him to go into Hueco Mundo and only gain information? He was sent on missions like this for a reason, not just because of his stealth abilities to hide around hollows. I did say it that way, didn't I? Are you saying you had a cup of tea with a hollow? That's just insane. As insane as it may seem, it's true. And what did you gain from your talk, Shiba Taicho? Glancing back at the Sao Taicho, he remembered his meeting with the two. The meeting was easier than he thought it would be, thank God it hadn't turned out to be needed to use force. Well, flashback. Ichigo was moving at high speeds, he didn't need to be caught and as such thought it better to go at his highest speed as to not be seen. He was trying to make his way into Las Noches and had just found a small entrance which he knew was there since the beginning. Once entering the hallways he made his way towards the spiritual pressure of the person he was trying to find. He considered himself lucky when he noticed exactly who was with him at the moment and couldn't help but smirk. Thinking that celebrating would be best to leave for later, he continued his quick pace towards the room where he knew they were. Upon entering the area he was able to make out part of their conversation. "Gets out of control, I will not hesitate to intervene. Looks like you finally decided to get out of bed and do something. The only reason why I let Barragan gain control of Las Noches in the first place is because I never thought he would go this far. But even so, now that he has gained so many followers, it may be impossible for us to stop him alone even if we are one of the strongest Espada. Maybe I can help with that." The two Espada visually stiffened at hearing a foreign voice. After all, they were talking about top secret stuff. They didn't even have their fraction nearby for that same reason. "Who are you? Identify yourself." Getting out of the shadows that had blocked their view, he took a step forward with hands held in front of him in defense and ensuring that he wouldn't attack. When the two Espada caught sight of Ichigo, they couldn't help but feel nervous even though he didn't have any spiritual pressure. "Calm down. I won't attack, so I'm asking you to not do so either." Slightly relaxing when seeing his sincere gaze and his hands never leaving their sight, the two Espada looked back at the orange head with something akin to curiosity more than menace. After all, how he entered anyways. "I'm captain of Squad 5 Shiba Ichigo, and I'm here in orders to investigate the current situation, not engage. After all, we need to know how the Espada would react to Aizen's death." "He really is dead then?" "That's right. And if I may add, I'm the one who killed him, so if you want to, now is your chance for revenge." Like he expected, neither moved a muscle when hearing they had a chance at revenge. After all, they only joined him because they felt they owed him something for helping them fulfill their desire. "I don't find any need to. I was only paying a debt when I agreed to join his ranks. My name is Coyote Stark and I am the Primera Espada." Bowing slightly in acknowledgement, he let his gaze turn to the other Espada that had yet to present herself, although he knew quite well who they were. "Likewise, I was only paying a debt. My name is Tier Haribel Tercera Espada." "Good. Now that presentations are over, I'll tell you the reason of me coming to talk to you directly and not someone else." After some explanations of what he was planning on doing and where or when he came from, giving proof by giving them information about themselves and their fraction that not anyone is supposed to know, they believed them. And thought it was a good idea to end Barragan's meaningless rule. "So the plan is the following. You want to get rid of Barragan and his little army of hollows. Storm into Las Noches and take out those that were loyal to Aizen and only Aizen. Beat some sense into those that can get sense beaten into and get them to understand. Make some sort of peace in Hueco Mundo that me and Haribel-san will keep as being the strongest hollows and the others will obey. And finally make some sort of agreement with Soul Society of not killing any Espada or hollow that actually knows reason within Hueco Mundo, as long as you people are not attacked, same as going for anyone that infiltrates Soul Society." "That's right. I think it benefits both of us. I know thanks to experience that even if you're hollow, you're not an emotionless beast, and more so you two that care so much about those you consider friends. Besides, that way we can keep track of the strongest hollows and you can make sure we won't infiltrate Hueco Mundo to slaughter you all. So, what do you say?" "I think it's a good idea. We can work with some sort of peace and ensure the safety of those around us." Nodding in understanding and finally getting them to relax, Ichigo was sitting down on a table with Stark and Haribel and had just finished explaining his plan. He was now happy it had gone easier and now had time to do other things before leaving. "Now, I'll be taking my leave. Lots of stuff to do before leaving for Soul Society. I'll make sure to promise you your safety and your fraction. Anyone else you want to add should wear some black ribbon of some sort or cloth to show their hostility." They both nodded in understanding and saw Ichigo disappear in a quick shundo, leaving them both confused as they noted that it was not Shunpo but neither was it Sonido. Flashback end. And as such there should be no need to exterminate the hollows. We can keep them in line if we have passive leaders taming them and most of all making sure that we will not be attacked by surprise. I understand the current situation. You made the right decision. Nodding and deciding to get in place next to Komamura, he was ready to move forward when he noticed that he had forgotten all about the bundle in his hands. Oh, I forgot to mention something. I brought someone with me. Showing them the little bundle and revealing a sleeping Nell in child form, he startled many at seeing the hollow mask on her head. A child. I didn't think you would be a kidnapper, Ichigo. Rolling his eyes at Zaraki's boldness at implying something that was so not likely because Nell was a hollow, and had her mask to prove it, he let out a sigh and pinched the bridge his nose. No, her name is Neliel2 Odelschwenk. She is the former Tercera Espada until a terrible incident made her skull crack and retreat into a child form to ensure her safety. I'm going to heal her and make her as she is also very powerful and was very well respected for thinking of others and never fighting without a reason. Her favorite phrase was one who possesses reason should require a reason to fight. Very well. If you consider it beneficial, I think there should be no problem. Concerning the measures we shall inflict on the current problem, I shall let Shiba Taicho lead the mission to Hueco Mundo. But before you choose who you will take, I shall announce the captain who will be rejoining us. After much debate and interrogations, we have thought best to have Ichimaru Jin return to our ranks as to keep an eye on him and also refill the vacant position. Seeing many startled eyes but not really caring, Jin entered the room and took his place next to Ichigo, giving him a creepy smile like always and not even caring that Ichigo had his eyes closed and seemingly not caring that Jin was eyeing him like a snake his prey. I hope we get along well, Ichi-chan. Do as you wish, Jin, but remember the reason you are here right now is because I vouched for you, so better keep your intimidations for someone else. Opening his eyes slightly and eyeing Ichigo curiously, he couldn't help but drop his smile slightly. This didn't go unnoticed by anyone and they all thought how incredible Ichigo was to be able to be uncaring and keep Jin on a leash. Creepy kid, ain't ya? Quote, I could care less what you think. After all, this wouldn't be the first time you tell me that. Opening his eyes slightly to look at Jin, he saw the small sweat that was starting to form on his brow. Satisfied at being able to have Jin wrapped around his finger since he vouched for him, he wanted to have him hostile for a while, and taking care of him himself was better. Enough of this. Shiba Taicho, how many and who do you consider efficient to accompany you on this mission? I want to at least bring 8 others with me, preferable no more than 3 lieutenants, and if I am taking lieutenants they have to be above average. If I take someone that isn't lieutenant, he or she must at least be at the level of a lieutenant. Noted. So who would you think of taking? Upon hearing your suggestion I will say if I can approve. Smirking at that and knowing pretty well that he would not complain one bit at his decision, he took a step forward and looked directly at Yamamoto. I wish to take with me. Number 16 Zaraki Kenpachi, Hisagi Shuhei, Hiraku Shunsui, Kuchiki Byakuya, Abarai Renji, Ichimaru Jin, Soifun, and I'll add Kusajishi Yakiru since I'm sure she'll tag along anyways. Some were surprised by the choices, others were just happy Kenpachi they could get a chance in a fight. But even if someone protested, the one that held the final word was the commander after all. I'll go ahead and ask to the captains and the captains of said lieutenants if there is a problem with going on this mission. When no one debated on the matter, Ichigo was relived as everything was going as planned. That sounded so much like Aizen, but anyway he felt everything would be perfect, but no, the world just likes to screw with his life. Soifun had to protest, like always. It may not be my place to say this, but Hisagi Fukutecho has a squad to tend to and there is no captain in the 9th. Ichigo had to suppress the urge to roll his eyes, it just had to be her. Didn't she even stop to think why he had even choose to take him? It wasn't on a whim or something like that. That is precisely why I want to take him with me. What? Ichigo closed his eyes and sighed. Some people just didn't think openly like they were supposed to. That's exactly why there has been a lot of problems in the past. The 9th squad is in turmoil. They need guidance and someone they can trust in, and the person they turn to is Hisagi. But as the ones below Hisagi must also feel this way, he needs more confidence and the squad needs someone they know is strong. So by taking him we can increase his confidence and that of his squad, let him see through his very eyes what the traitors were planning on doing. This seemed to silence her and made Soifun retreat to her spot in line. Seeing as no one had anything else to add, the commander lifted his cane slightly and banged it on the floor. So it is final. The people mentioned earlier shall be sent on this mission. Shiba Taicho is in charge and I will not accept disobedience. The mission will be carried out tomorrow at noon and the details shall be relayed in a separate meeting with the members of the team. The Sotaicho looked to the side to see Ichigo before asking the question directed towards him. Where and when the meeting shall be held? I don't want something so important to be blind. I was never planning on it. At 5 o'clock at the Shiba Manor. Yamamoto nodded his head and proceeded to look in front like always. Very well. Every member of the team has to attend. Dismissed. Once the loud voice of the commander died down, they all turned to the large door to leave to their respective duties until the meeting those that would go. Ichigo just left in the fastest shunpo she could muster, surprising many by his speed and silent exit that no one had noticed. Number 16 hash. Ichigo appeared in the middle of his office in the 5th division. He needed to start his piled-up work and do some other things for the meeting. He also needed to send a hell butterfly to the Shiba Manor to inform them of the visit and prepare a meeting room and some refreshments. He also needed to fix Nell's mask before the meeting. It would be good if she heard it too. He placed Nell on the couch and let her sleep. She was asleep and he needed her awake to fix it. He then proceeded to sit at his desk and start on the paperwork. He started to pass by every sheet of paper and soon enough he had finished. He then remembered of the hell butterfly and sent it to inform Hana. He was so caught up in reports for the meeting concerning the mission that he missed the door opening and Hinamori entering the office with Tushiro in tow. Taicho, when did you get to the office? Did you just finish all the paperwork? Ichigo glanced up at the two and saw they were a little closer than what people would normally be. He snickered at the thought that maybe the small captain had gotten the courage and told her already. Yeah, I finished already, so you can go have some fun with Hitsugaya Taicho. The both blushed when they saw Ichigo's intention but quickly turned it down as another thing came to mind. Shiba Taicho, you just arrived from Hueco Mundo, shouldn't you be resting, or eating for that matter? I doubt there's anything edible in Hueco Mundo. You're right, Shiro-chan, there are no edible things there. You have eaten, right Taicho? Ichigo couldn't help but widen in eyes. He had forgotten how Hinamori had been pestering him along with Akio and Rukia about his health. He was going to get it if they decided to call Rukia, and now that he thought about it he hadn't talked to her since the day of the party. You didn't you? That's not good Taicho. Wait here Shiro-chan, I'm getting him something to eat. Don't call me Shiro-chan bedwetter Momo. He didn't get a retort as Hinamori was already out the door, yelling some random orders to anyone poor enough to pass by her. Ichigo sighed at his Fukuteicho's antics. He wasn't getting any work done if she kept worrying about his eating habits. You shouldn't do that, you know. We can't have you collapsing unless when there's an important mission. The orange head couldn't keep in his laughter and had to cover his mouth to not do it out loud. Toshiro just raised an eyebrow at the captain. Was he broken or something? Sorry, it's just not possible for me to collapse over something like this. I can go for a week without food and no ill effects. I'd tell you that's impossible, but seeing as you've pretty much done the impossible already, but still, let's not find out if it's possible or not. We don't want a captain less in the ranks. Ichigo just sighed at that. In the war no one cared if you ate or not, everyone had to look out for themselves and survive, not eat and sleep. At least he was getting better sleep now. Number 16 hash. After Hinamori had brought Ichigo food and almost forced it down his throat, Ichigo decided to go visit Rukia at the 13th since he hadn't seen her, and missing her yelling and company was an easy thing to do. He was passing by the 13th grounds when he heard a particular midget yelling at someone. When Ichigo heard the person respond he knew it was Renji right away. After all, who can't recognize Renji's voice? He decided to go and see what they were yelling about and shun-PO'd over, but what they weren't expecting was the orange-head captain to appear out of nowhere. So when he did they were very startled by his silent arrival. What are you two yelling about? Whoa, Ichigo. Don't scare us like that, you idiot. Ichigo lifted his hands in defense, seeing as the two childhood friends had decided to gang on him and attack him about his silent arrival. Ichigo was about to ask to them to shut up and answer his previous question when Rukia answered it for him. And what's with the mission? Why aren't you taking me with you? Ichigo narrowed his eyes and looked at Renji. He most likely told her and caused this. Renji paled and felt sweat go down his brow in nerves since Ichigo had an unreadable expression on. You're not ready, Rukia. I'm not taking you. Why? Is it because I'm weak? No. Rukia flinched at Ichigo's neutral and direct voice. She wanted to go, to be with him, and it was most likely because she was weak that he didn't even think to take her. If it's not that, then what is it? Why won't you take me? You're not strong enough, Rukia, and that's more than enough reason not to take you. Rukia scowled at Ichigo's roundabout explanation. She felt like she was being played and she didn't like it one bit. That's the same thing. Lesson for the two of you. Being weak and not being strong enough are two different things. Being weak is not being able to do anything. When you're not strong enough, it just means you have the chance to get stronger and get better. It's not bad not being strong enough, it's bad being weak and helpless. That shut up both of them. They sometimes forgot that Ichigo lived a difficult life without them, but at the same time with them. He was wise. He doesn't do anything on a whim. He thinks things through and has a reason for everything. I guess you're right. Ichigo couldn't help but smile. Rukia rarely admitted her errors, and when she did, she would do it sincerely. He patted her on the head and ruffled slightly her hair. Rukia was kind in her own sweat way, and that's why he loved her. Stop that. Rukia was going to slap Ichigo's hand away when she remembered about the meeting she had with the Shibas and couldn't help but blush. She went on her tippy toes to whisper something in his ear. Seeing this, Ichigo ducked slightly to hear what she had to say. Did they tell you of what I decided of the arrangement? Ichigo blushed at the thought of the arrangement. He really wanted to know, and now that she had mentioned it, he was dying to know. Ichigo shacked his head in negative so that Rukia could answer him. If she was whispering, that meant she didn't want Renji to know yet. Renji, on the other hand, was between being confused and mad. Both were being very secretive and he didn't like it one bit. He was the childhood friend, and he'd be damned if he didn't take care of Rukia, since she was like a sister to him, and keeping secrets was not part of what friends do. And also the fact that Ichigo was blushing and looked nervous wasn't helping one bit. Don't worry, Ichigo, I said yes. Ichigo seemed to process it before he finally realized what she was saying. But still he held his doubt. He didn't want her to be pushed at doing something she didn't want to. Are you sure? I won't feel bad about it if you don't want to. Ichigo was completely silenced when soft lips were pressed against his. He was shocked beyond belief. He was wide in eyes and didn't dare move. He felt his cheeks color red even more at the gesture, and he didn't even notice the gapping Renji to the side. Of course I'm sure, idiot. I was sure when Ni-sama told me about it, and when your dad told me what you had said, my decision was even hardened. Ichigo smiled at the raven head. He was happy. Happy beyond belief, even more so when Rukia told him she loved her too, and it was better that she had given him the first kiss of this relationship. She was always like that, sometimes straightforward and sometimes too nervous. I think we should tell poor Renji before he dies on us here. Rukia looked to see Renji for the first time since Ichigo came. He really looked bad. He was wide-eyed, jaw hitting the floor, and paler than ever. Kuchiki Taicho is going to kill you when he finds out. Ichigo and Rukia looked at each other and couldn't help but burst laughing at that. After all, Byakuya had been the one to recommend the arrangement. Renji was even more confused now, and he was starting to feel he was missing something. Ni-sama was the one to bring up the proposal. Renji, Rukia and me are in an arranged marriage now, even though it doesn't quite feel like one. Rukia nodded in understanding to affirm Ichigo's statement. She also felt like it wasn't something forced or something like what she had heard, an arranged marriage. Renji went back to his goldfish-like state. He was gapping and couldn't believe his ears. His childhood friend that was a noble was getting married to his other friend that also happens to be a noble, and apparently they're happy about it. I don't know what to say. Congratulations, I guess. Thank you, Renji. It means a lot to me that you agree with our relationship. Ichigo could only feel the same. After all, Renji was like a big brother he never had in the future. He just hoped he could get along with him in the present too. Well, I have to go for now. See you at the meeting, Renji. Don't be late. Bye, Rooks. With that, Ichigo disappeared in before they could even say bye. Did he just call you Rooks? Rukia just shrugged it off and turned around towards the 13th division. She had stuff to do and she wasn't going to slack off just because she could, since Yukatake Taicho was sick again. Number 16 The Shiba Manor was currently occupied by a very important meeting. The head of the clan, or the 5th squad captain, was hosting this meeting that was very important for the mission that would be held tomorrow. Ichigo was at the head of the table and the rest of the members were around the table. There were cookies and tea for refreshments and everyone was silent waiting for the last person to arrive. Once everyone arrived, Ichigo decided to speak up. Okay, I'm pleased to see everyone came. This meeting is very important and must be directed as such. Any questions before we begin? Renji was the first to hold up his hand of the 5 that lifted it, so Ichigo gestured him to go ahead. No offense Shiba Taicho, but why do you have a kid on your lap at a meeting? Ichigo glanced down at his lap. Nell was sitting quietly though gripping on Ichigo's haori like if her life depended on it. Ichigo had his hand on her skull and was radiating reddish light. Ichigo, those people are sky. Ichigo smiled at the small girl. He had told her not to worry and that everything would be just fine, but even Sashi was scared and Ichigo needed to finish the healing. It was already more than 3/4 fixed, so it wouldn't take much time to finish. It's okay Nell, I promised no one would hurt you and I'm almost finished fixing your mask. Does that answer your question, Renji? So you're fixing her mask. But what does that have to do with her being here? That's right, she's a very strong assessment and she'll help in the upcoming mission, so I wanted her to hear the meeting. It's been taking more time to fix her mask than what I thought it would, but... Before Ichigo could finish his sentence, a loud pop and a pink smokescreen appeared around Nell and Ichigo since she was on his lap. Another loud thud startled those at the table since Ichigo also made a startled cry. When the pink smoke cleared, the sight at the end of the table was something that amused many of those present. Ichigo was on the floor completely lying down with a grown-up size Nell sitting on his abdomen. She had her green gown ripped and barely covering only the necessary places and had a dumbstruck expression while Ichigo was just mildly annoyed. Ow! Many couldn't help but snicker at the orange head's misery. Nell on the other hand looked down to see where she was sitting. When she realized exactly on what she was sitting, she beamed with happiness and threw herself to give him a bone-crushing hug. Thank you Ichigo, you really did keep your promise. Of course, I did, but I can't breathe. Nell noticed how the color was starting to leave Ichigo and loosened her grip and stood up, mumbling a slight sorry before giving him a hand to stand up as well. Okay, now that that was finished, we can start the meeting. I want everyone to take a seat and hear the details of the mission, and questions about it will be at the end from now on. When everyone sat down and settled down, Ichigo took a breath to clear his thoughts and stood up to see everyone better. The mission is the following. Tomorrow at noon we shall infiltrate Hueco Mundo by Garganta that I will provide. Once entering, we shall do complete extermination of the hollows and low-level Arankar that are surrounding the dome of Las Noches, where the Espada live. The Espada are ranked from 9 to 0, with the biggest number being the weakest and 0 being the strongest. The 0 is normally seen as the 10th, but once he releases he turns into the 0. Releases are when a Arankar uses his Zanpakuto like us to use our Shikai, but instead they have their true power locked inside it and are many times stronger when using it. When we have opened a path inside, we shall annihilate those that need to be annihilated and just defeat those we need to defeat. There are some on our side, so make sure to see if they are not wearing a black ribbon somewhere in their person. I shall pass on these files with data about the Espada and their fractions. Ichigo passed out the reports he had made earlier to each one of the present. Some of you have a specific target and it's told who in those papers, others can just stick to who they think is better for their abilities or they want to try. The Espada number 1 and 3 are the ones on our side with no doubt about it, including their fraction. The Segunda is the one in charge of the whole army and the one creating the revolt. He is the leader and the one that must be taken down. Hisagi and Renji, if you confront an Espada, stick together. I want everyone back alive. Yakiru, don't stray from Kenpachi, and most importantly for every one of you, if you happen to confront the 4th Espada, don't even think of fighting him. If he told someone of his true strength, I'm pretty sure he would be the second, not Baragon, the current one. I would prefer to take him down myself, as I know the trick he has up his sleeve and also the fact that he is someone that must be left alive too. Once everyone seemed to understand the information, Ichigo sat down and asked if there were any questions. When no one had any questions, they all stood up and left to their divisions, and Nell left with a servant from the manor to get cloths. When he felt everyone leave, he spoke up once again. Was there something you wanted to ask? Go ahead, Jin. Jin came out of the shadows in the corner. He had left like the rest but had returned and hidden. He had completely suppressed his Ryutsu and was quite surprised he had been found so soon. Ya found me pretty quick. why are ya taking me? So ya can keep an eye on me. No, I trust you. He was more than shocked by that. No one trusted him, not even before the Aizen fiasco, and here was Ichigo saying he trusted him. The kid was nuts in Jin's eyes. I'm a snake, cold of flesh and devoid of heart. My tongue flicks back and forth, ever in search of new prey, and if I like what I find, I swallow 'em whole. You can't trust me. If I would like to describe you as something, I would say you're more of a fox. Jin let his creepy grin down and started at Ichigo while he sat down. Jin just couldn't understand the kid. He was weird and would all of a sudden come up with something that would make you get out of balance. You aren't cold. If you were Matsumoto-san, would have never fallen for you. A fox can be very kind with his family and love many, but as soon as you look at the fox, he drops his kind attitude and turns into someone that would trick you. That's exactly like you, Jin. I know who you really are, how you really act, not your creepy grin. He was confused even further. The orange head seemed to know so much but at the same time be so vague with what he knew. It was just plain weird. Were we friends? You could say we were. You always told me about his plans when you could. We would talk sometimes. It was fun to some extent. Ichigo smiled at the memories he had. Of all the bad ones, he still had good ones he never wished to forget. Instead of speaking up, Jin just left, and for once he actually had a genuine smile. Ichigo just hoped he would scare the crap out of someone if they saw him smiling for real. Number 16 It was a relatively normal morning in the Shiba Manor. Everyone was starting their everyday activities and doing what they needed to do. Even a certain ex-captain. Good morning Engichiiiiigoo. Ichigo was awoken by his father's yell and was able to dodge before he even realized what he was doing. He counter-attacked with an uppercut and sent his dad flying into the hall. Good morning Oyaji. Not even caring for his dad's attacks or the fact that he was standing up and entering his room in a more normal manner, Ichigo went to his closet and get changed. Ready for today, son? I'm leaving at noon. I don't know what you'll do though. I'll be going with you, of course. Ichigo stopped what he was doing. He had brush and hair and was sitting on the low stool. He was actually glad he was sitting, or else he would have fallen over. He looked away from the mirror to see his dad's expression and see if he wasn't kidding. When he saw how serious he was, Ichigo just sighed and placed the brush on the table. You do realize this is Soul Society business. And I'm bonding with my son and helping him in a father-son work day. Isn't it supposed to be the son going to the father's work? And we're going on an important mission. That's not bonding. Yes it is. Or do you rather go fishing with your old man? Ichigo flinched at that. The last time he went fishing with him it was a complete disaster. He sighed once again and slumped his shoulders in defeat. He proceeded to tie his hair with the little thing he got from Kukaku and stood up, looked at his dad directly in the eyes in a serious expression. We leave at noon. Don't be late. Number 16 It was already noon and Ichigo was waiting for Kenpachi and Yakiru to arrive. They were the last ones and they were already late. He was going to go bring him when he all of a sudden appeared. Seeing as everyone was there, he walked back and went to the open area where he would open the Garganta. Okay, listen up. I'm about to open the Garganta and I want everyone to jump in after I do. Stay on the Reishi path unless you want to be lost in the middle of worlds forever. Before going out of the Garganta and into Hawako Mundo, suppress your Ryutsu the best you can. And those that can't, you should have thought of better candidates if you needed that. Don't worry about that Soifun Taicho, I'll cover for that. Now, don't stray from the group until you're told. Ichigo flickered a Garganta open with a touch of a finger and jumped in without a second to spare. He made a solid and perfect path for everyone, and once the group of 11 entered the space, he closed it back and started to run into the dark abyss. Number 17 Everyone was silent on the trip to Hawako Mundo. They were all following Ichigo through the black abyss on the green perfect and big path the 5th squad had created, showing his skills in Ryutsu control in pure action. All you could hear in the place were the footsteps of 10 people, since Ichigo didn't even make a sound, almost like if he were walking on air. They were all brought back from their silent treachery when Ichigo announced the end of the tunnel. The abyss opened up to a dark place, white sand until the eye could see in a lone crescent moon in the sky. Everyone landed on the sandy terrain with utmost silence, since they didn't want to alert the enemy, and those that could, suppressed their Ryutsu. What surprised mostly everyone was that Ichigo, which was currently facing the horizon and had his back to them, was actually doing the exact opposite, making his Ryutsu more predominated in the vast sandy desert. Son, I think you should hide your Ryutsu too. You were the one that told us to do so in the beginning after all. Isshin was fazed and confused as the rest of the team by their leader's actions. Ichigo just ignored his dad and reached up behind him to untie his hair and let it loose, grabbing the hair piece Kukaku had given him and putting it in his pocket. Isshin was about to speak up when Ichigo's Ryutsu increased even more, making it clearly visible surrounding him slightly in red and black. It was strong and hollow-like, but more than anything menacing. Ichigo glanced back at his comrades and surprised them when they saw his yellow eyes in a sea of black. His orange long hair was starting to flow with the currently non-existent wind and was messier than usual. I'm using my hollow Ryutsu as cover for those that can't suppress theirs. How does that help our cause, Ichigo-kun? Ichigo glanced to look at the older man. He was actually surprised that he hadn't protested of assisting in the mission at the end. Do you know the rule of Hueco Mundo, Kiraku-san? When he nodded in no, Ichigo was about to respond when Nell raised her Ryutsu as well and responded before him. In Hueco Mundo it's either kill or be killed, and when you evolve to a state where logic is more common you avoid the stronger on instinct. That's right, and as such with both our hollow Ryutsu, any that you might leak will be camouflaged and we'll be able to move without worrying of being attacked. They all seemed to understand Ichigo's reasoning. It would be way easier to move around without being attacked that way. Ichigo motioned them all to follow him into their trip to the castle of Las Noches. Since Ichigo opened the Garganta slightly far away but not by much, after all it was the rendezvous point in between the White Castle and where he had his base in the past, future. But in any case it was only 1 hour away stroll to the castle. Once they all arrived to an area where they could see the bunch of Ijukas and low-level Arankar were guarding Las Noches, Ichigo stopped and glanced back at them. Okay, here's the plan. Nell, I need you to find Halibel and Stark, and I want you three to subdue the Arankar the best you can. We'll handle the Espada. Now, to get through this army, I want the group to be divided in half. One team shall go to the right and the other half to the left so that the hollows won't escape. Yakiru, don't stray from Kenpachi. Renji and Hisagi, when dealing with an Espada, deal with it together. They're not small fry, they're the top 10, so don't feel ashamed. Ichigo looked at everyone to see if they were following his lead. The group had been divided in half, and one team was Kiraku, Soifun, Renji and Hisagi, while the other was Isshin, Jin, Byakuya, Kenpachi and Yakiru. Nell had already separated herself from the group to inform the two Espada of the plan. He just hoped she could get there without problems. You'll go with the other group to even it out, son. He shook his head in negative at his father's statement. He had other plans and was going to carry them out individually. No, I'm going through the middle and heading on my own. I have someone I have to fight myself. I need to see for myself if he should be left alive. Going through the middle on your own will be hard. Maybe it should be appropriate if I were to assist you. No thanks, Kuchiki Taicho, no offense, but anyone who would come with me would be in my way. Ichigo turned around to look at the giant army. He was still radiating red Ryutsu and looked very imposingly with the breeze in his wild orange locks. Before disappearing in a quick sonito, he surprised many with his last statement. I'm a one-man army for a reason. Seeing as there was no room for debate, the two groups split up, one going to the left and the other to the right, but they were all surprised when a giant explosion came from the center. Number 17 hash. Ichigo appeared in front of the great army, surprising many. He was carrying a bloodthirsty smile and was radiating more red and black Ryutsu that held more hollow than nothing. His golden eyes in a sea of black looked even more menacing when his sun-kissed skin started to turn a pale white and a hollow hole formed in the middle of his chest, but still held no mask or white armor whatsoever. Who goes there? A brave Arankar stepped forward from the crowd and stood in a defensive manner but couldn't stop the slight shake of his hands that held his sword. Ichigo's grin grew wider if possible as he looked more like a maniac than anything right now, but he didn't care. Those who would see him now would be dead in no time, so he didn't care if Shiro's attitude rubbed on him when he used too much of his power. After all, the only ones he wouldn't like for them to see him were his comrades, and they weren't here. As cheesy as it may seem, your worst nightmare. Ichigo charged a crimson Sero at the tip of his index finger. It grew until a reasonable size and didn't give the poor hollows a chance to escape as it was released. Sero. The whole blast was devastating as it completely erased the existence of the ones in its path, creating a giant explosion. Ichigo knew perfectly well he was being too flashy but didn't care. Better let them come than he going to them, maybe it would make the mission end faster. Once the smoke of the blast was cleared, the whole path in front of Ichigo was gone. Any hollow that once stood in between him and Las Noches was gone, and a gaping hole was left in its stead, letting him see the sands under the artificial sun. He was not even phased when the remaining hollows in the area charged their way to the orange head. Ichigo just unsheathed both Zangetsu and Muramasa and slashed his way in the crowd of hollows, leaving a trail of blood in his stead and mountains of bodies as well. Crush them to bits, King. Let's have some fun. I can only agree with you now. Shiro, let's show them our power. Grinning like a madman and cutting in half any opponent in his way, he stopped and put both Zanpakuto next to each other in one hand, almost like if wanting them to meld together as they were touching each other's tsuba. Ichigo, using both hands, started to pump dark black Ryutsu into the blade before taking a step back and making the blade go behind him in a position ready for an upward swing. Getsuga, Sero. He made an upward slash but never moved an inch as the dark energy escaped from his sword and burnt to a crisp any remaining enemy. He relaxed his position and saw that the rest of the hollows were either in a big bundle to his right or to his left, most likely trying to take a hit on the two teams. Ichigo sighed and flushed down his Ryutsu back into him with a deep breath, making it retreat inside him and making the hollow hole and white pale skin return to normal. He sheathed his two companions and walked towards the gaping hole in the wall of Las Noches. Upon entering it, a wave of nostalgia hit him of so many battles he had encountered in such place, and couldn't help but close his eyes and glance at the fake sun to feel the fake breeze play with his loose, long orange locks. He was so lost in thought he didn't notice the presence of his comrades behind him until his father's flying double knee attack that he unconsciously dodged before he even realized, making his father collide face first with the cold sand. Okay, now we get rid of the espada that are necessary. Those that have a certain opponent, I hope you find him, and those who don't are free to fight whoever they want as long as you follow the information of if he should die or not. There is only one order. They all looked pensively at Ichigo, awaiting the sole order they would be given by their leader for now. Don't die. Before their very eyes a blur of white materialized into a tall man. With a mask taller than his own head covering his face, the mask held various little holes. He had his sword drawn and was going for the kill right behind Ichigo. Everyone tensed and went to draw their swords when the espada's mask started to crack ever so slightly and a shower of red came from his shoulder. They all glared back at the orange head to find him with Muramasa out of his sheath and dripping blood. They were all shocked further when the mask cracked more to break into tiny pieces and to show a displeased Shiba Kaian as he went to cover the sun from his eyes. That only further angered the normally calm captain of the 5th Division at seeing his cousin being used that way. I would stop using my cousin's face arrow. After all. Ichigo sonitoed behind the espada and stabbed him in the chest, making him fall over in pain and clutching his wound as Ichigo took his sword out of his body, leaving him to support his own battered body that didn't quite resist. You're about to die. Arrow spit out blood before showing his true colors. The tank-like head was now visible and the two little, floating heads could be seen as well. You bastard, He was cut off from finishing his sentence when Ichigo crushed his tank with his Ryutsu-enhanced foot, completely and permanently silencing the man. Now that that's taken care over, we can continue. And guess what? Ichigo turned to find a disappointed Kenpachi and the rest shocked. Seeing this, he smirked as they were even more fazed by Ichigo's full ability in combat. One espada less to deal with. Che, if that's what an espada is like, then they're pretty weak. Not at all Kenpachi, that was Espada Navina Araniero Ururueri. He was once a hollow Agilian that at some point in the past had gained the powers of former Shinigami Lieutenant Kaian Shiba by absorbing Metastasia, the hollow who killed and fused with Kaian. By doing this, Araniero was able to gain not only Metastasia's power to fuse with others, but Kaian Shiba's powers and abilities as well as his Zanpakuto. Finally getting out of their daze, Kiraku spoke up from the small crowd. Ma, Ju-chan is going to be pleased that his soul can finally rest in peace, but even so, you're a scary opponent, Ichigo-kun. Ichigo only smirked at that. He was happy he could still surprise the captains. Where would the fun be in any of that if he couldn't? And the best of all was they had yet to see his resurrection. Everyone get to work. Kenpachi, your opponent is west from here. Maybe he'll be fun. With a cocky grin, Kenpachi turned tail and headed west at his full speed with a laughing Yakiru at his back. Shiba Taicho. Ichigo glanced back at Hisagi, who was a little nervous. He had heard from the messenger of the reason why he was chosen and didn't want to disappoint the new captain. Yes, Hisagi. Renji and my target were either the 9th, which you just killed, the 8th or the 7th. Where can we find them? We don't know their Ryutsu signature. Ichigo looked around the area before pinpointing the two Espada. He raised an eyebrow when he noticed Nell's Ryutsu near the pink-haired scientist and smirked. She can handle him. Well, the 7th is in that white tower over there. Ichigo pointed at one of the many towers in the inside of Las Noches and saw the two lieutenants disappear in a mid-level shunpo fit for a lieutenant. He then turned to the rest of the group to give them the necessary instructions. The rest of you have open menu as long as you follow my instructions on who to kill and who to just subdue. Just leave the one in that building to me. Not waiting to see where the remaining people went, he left in a slow, for him, sonido. He was surprised when his dad caught up with him and stopped to ask why he was following him when Ishin made a sideways kick to his ribs that hit dead on but barely hurt. Ow ow ow. What are you made of, steel? Stupid Oyaji. I have my Hiero at max right now. Of course it was going to hurt. He touched his side to see if there were any ill effects and that stupid kick. Happy to find no pain whatsoever, he glanced down at his dad that was clenching his foot in pain. Ichigo sighed and crouched down to heal his dad's foot since it was partially his fault as well. Oh, so you're healing your old man. I knew you loved me. Don't be an idiot, you need to be at 100% here. You need to go back to Yuzu and Karen. Ishin frowned and looked at Ichigo with a serious expression and grabbed his shoulder. You two, you know, I don't need you to tell me that. Done. Now, why are you following me? You didn't say goodbye to Daddy. Ichigo was about to retort when he heard a loud stomp behind them. He glanced back and noticed the blue-haired man with his hands in his pockets and a mad grin. Ah, what a lovely scene. Too bad I'll have to interrupt it. Both Kurosakis narrowed their eyes at the Espada's choice of words. Ishin stood up and put a protective arm in front of Ichigo. He had to suppress the urge to roll his eyes at his dad's protectiveness and how easily he seemed to forget how strong he was. Which one of you will fight me? Ignoring him for now, Ichigo stood up as well and went next to his dad, glancing back at the Espada. I'll leave him to you. Don't kill him, he's number 6. Ichigo sonidoed away and left the two soon-to-be opponents staring at one another ready for battle. Ishin took a loud step forward and unsheathed Engetsu, making Grimmjow do the same. Kurosaki Ishin. And you Espada. Sexta Espada Grimmjow Jagerjackaz. Grimmjow sprung forward to meet Ishin's sword and Ishin made a swing upwards to meet the other. A pleasure to meet you. Number 17 hash. Byakuya was going at full speed to one of the strongest Ryutsus he could feel. He was so focused he hadn't noticed the third squad captain was following him until now. Why are you pursuing me? You heard Ichi-chan. Open menu. And it just so happens that you're heading towards the 0 Espada. That guy is to be battled in pairs. Not really showing it but actually emitting his annoyance, he wanted to curse at his misfortune of having the creepy captain as a battle partner. But Kuchiki Byakuya does not show his emotions. He's a calculative man that wouldn't care less, so he would bear with it for now and ask to never be paired with him again. He wouldn't be judged. The only one that wouldn't mind being with the silver-haired captain was Ichigo. After all, he actually had him on a leash to everyone's surprise. The time traveler could actually control the man, and that was quite interesting on Byakuya's opinion. Just don't get in my way. Yes, Byakuya. He just couldn't resist the urge to roll his eyes. How unlucky of him. Byakuya was suddenly stopped from his musing when a loud yell was heard. He looked to his right and noticed a giant dark-skinned man yelling at a poor hollow dog to leave him alone. He was taken aback by how the hollow dog looked so innocent, and yet he didn't seem affected by the harsh insults thrown his way. Hi, Yami. It's been a long time since I last saw ya. Did ya get bigger? Ichimaru. Jin, the other stupid Shinigami. I thought you got yourself killed like Aizen. Jin tensed at the mention of Aizen and opened slightly his eyes, enough to surprise the stoic 6th squad captain at seeing the icy blue eyes for what seemed to be the first time. As ya can see, I'm alive and kickin'. But ya won't be for very long. Yami only smirked when he saw what the apparent traitor in his side was thinking. Maybe having to obey the supposed king of Hueco Mundo wasn't that bad if he was able to crush that creepy grin. Maybe you two won't be as boring as flies. I'll crush you. Number 17 hash. Nay Renji. Renji looked at his companion with a raised eyebrow motioning him to continue. He was fidgeting since the beginning of the mission, and even though he seemed to be concentrating and on guard, Renji knew other why. You know Shiba Taicho on a more personal level. What do you think he expects from me? They hadn't stopped in all their journey from the group to the tower, but hearing Hisagi so doubtful made him stop and think for a second, making the other stop as well and look at him with slight hopeful eyes that maybe he had the answer he was looking for. Well, it's true, I do know him on a more personal level, and I know we were even better friends in the future if how he acts around me is anything to go for. But from what I know of him and what Rukia has told me, I'd say he just wants you to find more confidence. Sometimes he helps without even asking for permission, and I feel this is one of those moments where he just butts in other people's business. Renji lifted a hand to rub nervously the back of his head. He wasn't good with this, and it wasn't helping that it was on such a bizarre topic that seemed to mean a lot to the lieutenant. So you feel he's just trying to help? Yeah, that's most likely. He knows us better than we know him, remember? Maybe this really is what you need to get you back on your feet. You have to be there for your division after all. Hisagi just smiled lightly and nodded, continuing on their journey that had almost come to an end. He was grateful that Renji could interpret Ichigo's intentions better than he could. It made him feel lighter seeing as the captain wasn't actually expecting anything from him, just wanting him to pull himself back together, and that was something he could do. Had to, for his squad and himself. How unexpected. Visitors that all have to eradicate for Aizen-sama's sake. Both Fukutechos went into battle stance as soon as they caught sight of the espada that was mediating seemingly relaxed on the floor. They had their hands at their Zanpakuto ready to draw it at any moment. I shall avenge Aizen-sama by killing you, pity Shinigami. Number 17 hash. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Espada. Ken-chan. Yelling won't help find him. Ichi said to go west. That pussy Espada should be here. Who are you calling pussy? Kenpachi looked back to see a skinny man, tall, that had a white Espada uniform on and looked much like a spoon. He had his giant sword at his shoulder and had a maniacal grin that mirrored that of Kenpachi. So you finally decided to show up. I was never hiding. That's for cowards. I don't care who you are, but as long as you'll give me a good fight, it might be worth telling you my name. Kenpachi's grin only widened if possible, and was even more pleased to see that Yakiru got off his back, not even needing to tell her. Bring it on. Number 17 hash. Who are you? The air was tense. It could be cut easily by a butter knife. Two emotionless men stared into each other's eyes. Green eyes were locked with amber dull that seemed to make the Quarta feel nervous under his gaze. He didn't even remember how he had gotten in this situation. He was as normally just walking around the corridors when he entered a specific, empty building, and the next thing he knew was that this man was right in front of him. The lack of response from the other made him frown even deeper as the amber eyes pierced his very soul. 5th Squad Captain Shiba Ichigo. I came here to eliminate threats to Soul Society and restore peace to Hueco Mundo along with my comrades and the help of Primera Espada Stark, Tercera Espada Halibel, and former Tercera Nalil. The man just stayed quiet, eyeing the orange-haired man and gauging how truthful he was really being. He could feel other Shinigami present in the area of Las Noches, and that was unacceptable. He is the one in charge of seeing that everything was in order. He obeyed his superiors and nothing else. He had no meaning in life but doing that, following orders until someone stronger came and kicked the former off his ruling and obey that person. He did that as a repetitive cycle. His life holds no meaning. Aizen gave him a meaning. Aizen died. Barragan ordered him to protect his castle, and that was what he was going to do until told otherwise. Barragan was the strongest here that was actually issuing orders. Then I shall eliminate your existence and be on my way to do the same with the rest. I would like to see you try. Quarta Espada Ulquiorra Schiffer. Number 17 hash. Who would have thought that two lowly Shinigami could get here to my throne? That just shows how incompetent the Arankar here are. You can never trust them with even the simplest of orders. I'll have to do it on my own. The current king of Hueco Mundo stared at the two captains until he stood up and unsheathed his sword in a lazy manner, making the two do the same but on edge as they knew of his scary ability. Barrigan Lusenbairn, the king of Hueco Mundo, at your service. 2nd Squad Captain Soinfin. 8th Squad Captain Kiraku Shunsui. Let's have a friendly fight, shall we, Espada? I'll leave him to you. Don't kill him, he's number 6. Ichigo sonidoed away and left the two soon-to-be opponents staring at one another ready for battle. Isshin took a loud step forward and unsheathed Engetsu, making Grimmjow do the same. Kurosaki Isshin. And you, Espada. Sexta Espada Grimmjow Jackarguas. Grimmjow sprung forward to meet Isshin's sword and Isshin made a swing upwards to meet the other. A pleasure to meet you. As the two swords made contact, a shock wave of the force used was seen, disrupting the peaceful sands of Hueco Mundo. Making an attempt to dominate the situation, Isshin took a step backwards to momentarily free himself from the clash, bringing his Zanpakuto a second time to meet the other and overpower him, making Grimmjow make a back flip to dodge the swing aimed at his torso. Taking advantage of the moment, Isshin shun-PO'd behind the grinning Espada to strike at his open back. Predicting this, Grimmjow sonidoed out of his way as Engetsu met the cold sands of Hueco Mundo. Not wanting to be kept off guard, he quickly turns around to find the teal-haired Espada aiming for a punch at his head. His honed instincts react accordingly and dodges instinctively, barely getting free from the hit at his jaw. Taking in the opportunity as Grimmjow is in mid-punch, Isshin slashes in an upward strike to meet the Espada's skin. He quickly backs away to see the damage he did and catch his breath. Not bad, Shinigami, you actually managed to scratch me. Isshin glanced back at the grinning man to see that, true to his words, he had a long scratch that had a little trickle of blood seeping from it. This made Isshin widen in eyes and cursing to himself for underestimating the Espada's hierro. He should have learned his lesson when he hurt his foot thanks to Ichigo's own. Ha, you know that was meant to hurt you more, guess I'll have to get serious. You better not disappoint, Kurosaki. Isshin grinned, not as much as the one that Grimmjow had, but one that promised mischief. Burn, Engetsu. As he muttered the command, a surge of Ryutsu was felt and made Grimmjow feel anxious for a good fight. Not wasting time on engaging in further conversation, he shun-PO'd behind the Espada to send a nameless Getsuga Tenshou that startled the man, making him widen in eyes at the force of the attack. I'm not done yet. Surprising him even further, he fired another one from the opposite side of the first to corner the Espada that was busy blocking the first to notice the second and was engulfed head-on. Isshin stood at the side, ready to fight if necessary, but waiting to see what lie behind the smoke where the Espada is. It had at least done considerable damage, that's what he wanted to believe after all. He was surprised to see a panting Grimmjow in the middle of the destruction. He had all his upper clothing burned to a crisp and had a mean gash at his shoulder. It wasn't as much damage as Isshin was expecting, but at least it did something. And that was better considering his hierro. Piece of shit of Shinigami, I'll put you in your place. A giant surge of Ryutsu made Isshin widen in eye, noticing how even though he was injured he still seemed to have energy to spare, and that made chills go down his spine. Grimmjow stabbed his sword on the sand and passed his finger through the blade to make a cut and draw blood. With the same hand he targeted with an open palm at Isshin that was quite confused by his actions until he noticed the Sero forming and quickly tried to react. Gran Rey Sero. The giant blue Sero fired and headed directly towards Isshin that was already charging a powerful Getsuga Tenshou to counter the attack and get as unscathed as possible. The moment the Sero was close enough, he let the charged up energy in a big crescent slash collide with the blue attack. Getsuga Tenshou. The attacks collide, making a turmoil of pale blue and deep blue fight for dominance, ending in both being in equal grounding as they both disappeared, seemingly overcoming one another. Not wanting to waste a second, Grimmjow uses Sonido to gain the upper hand and appears behind Isshin, making him jump in a backflip to avoid the blow that hit the sand. Quickly retracting, Grimmjow made his swing find Isshin in midair as he was still upside down, putting as quickly as possible Engetsu in front of him. He met the Espada's blow, only to be overwhelmed by the sheer force and thrown into a nearby tower, making it crumble down, burying him in the process. Hashtag Jin and Byakuya vs Yami hash. As ya can see, I'm alive and kickin'. But ya won't be for very long. Yami only smirked when he saw what the apparent traitor in his side was thinking. Maybe having to obey the supposed king of Hueco Mundo wasn't that bad if he was able to crush that creepy grin. Maybe you two won't be as boring as flies. I'll crush you. Taking a giant fist down with all his might, He cracked the nearby pillars by the force and created a smoke screen that separated the three, not letting them see in the midst of the storm. Not letting a moment to spare, Byakuya unsheathed Senbonsakura in a slow practiced manner, making a hissing sound as it slid of its sheath, waiting for an attack. He was surprised when all of a sudden a fist came from the smoke directly at his direction. Acting as fast as he could and eyes widening in shock, he brought his Zanpakuto up front to collide with the tough hierro Yami had to offer. Being pushed backwards but not letting the fist overpower him, he tried to push back to get off from the Espada's grasp, only to end in a futile effort. "Ain't ya forgettin' it's 2-on-1? All of a sudden Jin came from behind to get the 10th Espada in surprise, as he had momentarily forgotten about his other opponent, but it was late when he noticed as Jin lifted a hand aiming at his vulnerable back, having had more than enough time to cast the incantation before Yami even realized his presence. Ye Lord, mask of blood and flesh, all creation, flutter of wings, ye who bears the name of man. On the wall of blue flame, inscribe a twin lotus. In the abyss of conflagration, wait at the far heavens. Hado number 73, Soren Sokatsui. The blue Kido collided painfully at point-blank range at the Espada's back, making him take a step back and letting Byakuya escape from the grip he had on him, thanks to the force of his fist. Byakuya took a second to shunpo out of sight and appear next to the 3rd Division captain with an unreadable expression but a hostile aura radiating from the man. "I was in no need of your help. Baya-kun, we're supposed to watch each other's back as good friends we are. I never agreed to be your friend, I just said to stay out of my way. Don't ignore me." The loud yell was heard before a red energy came flying right at them. Luckily for them, they noticed sooner than Yami could realize and were able to dodge the bala that he had fired. "Stop moving around so much, you pieces of trash." The two captains were dodging non-stop at the flying ballast sent their way, seeing as they really held no interest in getting hit and finding out just how strong they really were. When Byakuya had enough of the defensive strategy they had opted to gain, he remained still and grabbed his Zanpakuto in front of him and muttered two words that made many shudder if they were directed towards them. "Scatter Senbonsakura." A whirlwind of sakura petals found their way towards the giant Espada, catching him off guard as he was too busy assaulting Jin with his ballast. The attack caught the Dachima Espada and engulfed him in a torrent of deadly petals, letting Jin regain his ground and settle down next to the other captain. "That didn't kill him, you know. I'd be disappointed if it did." Seeing as all of a sudden a giant red Sero piercing the pink tornado of petals, the two captains shunpoed away to gain more distance between them and their opponent. Once the smoke was cleared, they were greeted by the sight of the giant Espada panting with various scratches courtesy of Senbonsakura throughout his body, but not really damaged in any way critical. "I've had it with this. You think you can defeat me? Well, I'll show you flies who will smash who." Grabbing the hilt of his Zanpakuto, he slowly unsheathed it, letting his Ryutsu run rampant. Ira. The Ryutsu exploded into a cloud that shielded from prying eyes his release into his true form, turning giant with his caterpillar-like body and getting rid of the one that was placed next to the Zero, leaving the Zero alone to show his true rank. "I think it ain't smart to try and defeat him on our own. We should work together, Baya-kun." "As much as I hate to have to do so, I agree. I think I have a perfect plan." Having his interest spiked, he glanced to see the smiling Taicho next to him. He couldn't help but raise a curious eyebrow, wanting to hear the other's plan. #Kenpachi vs Noitora #. "So you finally decided to show up. I was never hiding. That's for cowards. I don't care who you are, but as long as you'll give me a good fight, it might be worth telling you my name." Kenpachi's grin only widened if possible, and was even more pleased to see that Yakiru got off his back, not even needing to tell her. "Bring it on." The two men collided in a fury of clashes and clashes of Ryutsu-induced strikes, trying to make the other back down and beat the other to the punch and get their opponent off guard to be the one to land the first hit. Making distance for a minute and promoting to glare at each other with equal pleased and maniacal grins, they can't help but grab that moment to inquire on unfinished business. "Ah, that's not all you got, is it? Maybe this'll be fun after all. What's your name, Shinigami?" The captain of Squad 11 Zaraki Kenpachi. Hinto Espada Noitora Jiruga. Not waiting for a second longer, Noitora slashes downward at Kenpachi that meets the blow midway, making his sword parry in between the giant sea-like blades, both men fighting with equal fury as to overpower the other. The Espada sonidoed backwards slightly to re-meet Kenpachi's attack, promoting in making clashes and clashes, if uncontrolled and equally splendid, for them fun. in consequence making giant smoke screens lift thanks to the force of the attacks. Letting the dust clear, Kenpachi takes a cocky stance with his sword at his shoulder. You're pretty good. Noitora not as satisfied as he would like to be, seeing as the previous blow had ruined his clothing, leaving him sleeveless on one side. He could only glare back, mildly annoyed at the fact that Kenpachi was being so laid back. Looks like I found a great opponent. How about you let me have some more fun, huh? Getting over angsting over some stupid sleeve, he could only smirk back at seeing the enthusiasm in his opponent. After all, the only reason why he even entered this army in the first place was to grow strong and fight. Right back at ya. They started another round of furry swings, clashes and meetings of steel versus steel until Noitora seemed to ha had enough and started putting more force on his attacks, pushing Kenpachi back even if slowly until he collided brutally against a pillar, even though he still held his own against Noitora's sword, both never separating. The hell? Don't tell me a move this weak is scaring you. I ain't even getting started yet. I'm waiting for you. Now come at me like your life depends on it. Getting his footing back and pushing back the espada, he stood up from his slightly crouched position and couldn't help but laugh out loud. I've been waiting for this. Waiting to be this pumped up. Ha! Grabbing his nameless Zanpakuto and placing it in front of him, Kenpachi stared back at his confused opponent, giving him an almost always present maniacal grin. From now on, our lives are on the line. No more feeling each other out. Understanding the other's bloodlust, Noitora couldn't help but give an equally maniacal smirk in return, reading his own sword up front. #Nalil vs Shielaporo #. What a surprise to see you after so many years, Nalil. It certainly has, since you helped Noitora get rid of me, that is. Both were glaring at one another. Nell was on her way to find Halibel and Stark when she accidentally ran into the pink-haired scientist. She really held nothing against the man, even if it was his fault that she was stuck as a child so many years along with her two brothers, completely powerless, but she couldn't help but feel uneasy about the way that Zale had just happened to be in the right moment to block her path. Now, we should leave that in the past and walk towards the future. Don't you think? Former Tercera Espada Nalil to Odelschwank. Nell only stared back at the sadist man as he seemed pleased with the way how she was looking at him. He seemed too confident for someone that was a lowly 8th espada compared to her power. Even if she had been gone from Las Noches so long, she still knew that she could beat him if there was a need, so why was he looking so confident? I have a deal to offer you by His Majesty King Barrigan. Still not taking the bait that was being dangled in front of her, she remained with an uncaring and emotionless expression, trying everything in her power to avoid being creeped out by his suspicious expression. Wouldn't you like your former position, Nalil? There is a wonderful and very powerful Arankar in my former position already. I refuse. Zale only gave a knowing smile in return, moving his head slightly to the side in curiosity, being very intrigued at the moment. Oh, her, that lowly traitor. Don't worry, King Barrigan said he would eliminate both the current Tercera and the Primaris since they couldn't be trusted or something. And why do you expect that I can be trusted? His grin only widened at her statement, and that made her barely be able to hold back the itch to grab her hilt at how he was talking about Ichigo's nakama, her nakama, Arankar she knew that she would like since she hadn't personally met the current Tercera yet, she thought against doing so as it was not in her personality and moral. Who said I ever trusted you? After all, I overheard your conversation with the Orange Head, but of course His Majesty doesn't know that. I'll just have to enjoy myself and make my own decisions since he seems to be indisposed. Zale slowly went towards the hilt of his Zanpakuto to unsheath it, carefully watching Nell's every movement even though she wasn't even fazed by the sharp hiss of his Zanpakuto. I'll just have to give you a warm welcome myself. I'll hope you'll go along with it. What do you say, Nalil? Never mind, you can't turn me down. What are you talking about? Ha! Zale only smirked and gave a quick thrust in between tiles of the floor, making a small incision only for a little crack to be heard, making the floor underneath Nell and himself disappear and make them both free fall down the hole where Zale knew was his own room. #Hisagi and Renji vs Zamari #. How unexpected. Visitors that all have to eradicate for Aizen-sama's sake. Both Fukutechos went into battle stance as soon as they caught sight of the espada that was mediating seemingly relaxed on the floor. They had their hands at their Zanpakuto ready to draw it at any moment. I shall avenge Aizen-sama by killing you, pity Shinigami. Both had serious expressions on They were ready with newfound determination. Renji didn't want to disappoint his captain and Hisagi really wanted to prove himself and not let Ichigo's expectations go to waste, so once they spotted the dark-skinned man that looked very much as the description, they couldn't help but think that they needed to be careful against him and not make a mistake. "You must be Zamari Ruro, the Septima Espada." Zamari seemed thoughtful for a second, frowning at the apparent knowledge the two lieutenants had about him when he knew nothing. He quickly pushed the thought aside and thought of concentrating at the matter at hand and answer the raven-haired Shinigami and his inquiry. "That is correct. And who are my two visitors? I would like to know the name of the men that will fall under my power. I rather not have to refer to you as nameless Shinigami." Renji just scoffed at the Espada and gave a quick glance at his partner to see if they were on the same page. Apparently both felt highly responsible to show the man that they were not easy prey even if they were just lieutenants. Lieutenant of Squad 6 Abarai Renji. Lieutenant of Squad 9 Hisagi Shuhei. The Espada just closed his eyes briefly before standing from his sitting position and looking directly at the two men with an unreadable expression. "I see, at least I will have names for your graves." Before either could react, Zamari had disappeared in a quick sonido, making both Shinigami on alert and unsheathed their Zanpakuto, turning to be back-to-back to not be caught off guard. What surprises them was when Zamari appears again, he is not only in front of Renji but also in front of Hisagi, with his Zanpakuto unsheathed as well and in front of him but not doing anything else. Gemelos Sonido. They both stare at the same man, tense at seeing this newfound skill that the Espada seemed to have and not wanting for a second to be caught off guard, silently thanking whatever got out there that they had thought of being back-to-back and not get cornered by the Espada in a different manner. At least this way they could watch each other's backs. "My Sonido is the fastest among the Espada." With a quick flicker, the clone that was in front of Hisagi disappears and the real Zamari is revealed and continues speaking in front of Renji, Hisagi still hearing attentively but not falling for the bait and keeping an eye out for what is in front of him and his surroundings. "And by adding a few extra steps, I can create a clone of myself. Truthfully, it's akin to playing a magic trick." They both seemed unfazed by this, even if they are slightly. After all, even if they read the report Ichigo had given them, it's not the same as seeing the abilities in real action. Magic tricks are meant to surprise the opponent, so please don't be embarrassed that you couldn't follow what I did and were startled because of it. This didn't seem to interest them as they already knew about it, but they had yet to really see the effectiveness in battle, and as such Renji decided to take the first step and took a quick step to slash at the Espada that was easily cut at his chest. Not wanting to be taken by the seemingly easy victory, he quickly noticed by the corner of his eye a clone appearing behind him, but was quickly assaulted by his partner as he saved him from being slashed, slashing the opponent in return that seemed to fall only to flicker into nothingness as the real Zamari appeared at their right. "So it's not limited to two clones after all." Smart remark. "That is correct, my Gemelos Sonido is not limited to two." They were surprised when they were surrounded by 4 clones. They were back-to-back once again and had 2 clones in front of each one of them quickly coming at each other. They jumped almost in practiced ease and avoided being impaled by the 4 swords, and in return the 4 flickered into nothingness. Renji was surprised when he felt someone behind him still in midair, and he widened in eyes when he saw who it was. Shit. He tried to turn around quickly even if he knew he would not be fat enough, so he was relieved when he heard Hisagi's voice chanting a Kido spell that almost hit the Espada if he hadn't dodged and retreated. Hado number 31, Shakaho. They both land on their feet and Renji gives a sigh of relief, glancing back at Hisagi that has a solemn expression on his face but nothing less, still looks at Renji with friendly eyes. "Thanks man, you saved me back there. Don't mention it." They both go back to the battle-ready stance, a silent conversation going on between the two as they know what their next move will be. Renji places his hand on the side of his Zanpakuto in front of him and yells, "Howl Zabumaru." Hisagi also does the same, getting into ready stance to release his Zanpakuto as he says in more relaxed tone his own command. "Reap Kazushini. Apparently you two are finally getting serious. Let's see how much of a fight you can put, though I doubt you will." They both stare at their opponent while Renji, being the level-headed, can't resist and barks at the other man in retort, not liking one bit how he seems to think of them as bugs. "Some bastard, you are thinking that you can beat us both. You're being so full of yourself, you arrogant prick. I see, so it seems it's in your nature to be ignorant to your own demise and are arrogant in your own way. So be it if you think that you two ever stood a chance against me. it seems I shall be forced to humiliate you, until you fall thanks to your own pride. They both tense as the dark-skinned man slightly crouches and places his sword in a horizontal manner, pointing his blade to his right and having a serious expression, carefully and slowly untightening his grip one finger at a time at the hilt and leaving the zanpakuto floating in midair as he joins his hand in front of him, one at each side, joining thumb with middle finger in a meditative sort of way. Quash. He quickly joins his hand in praying manner and his head starts to make a 90-grade spin sideways, making the two lieutenants sweat nervously and tense even more. Brujeria. His pupils widen and his zanpakuto just folds, snapping with each movement until it's in a caracol kind of way, releasing smoke that covers the espada as he transforms into his creepy released form. The smoke oozes and disperses, showing his true form, making the two narrow their eyes at the sight that greet them, but not for a second are they taken aback, as the report clearly stated what an odd guy the Septima was with the bunch of eyes all over his body. Hisagi widen in eyes when he sees the espada show his open palm with an eye glowing purple directly at them, and he quickly grabs Renji by the collar and shunpos away from the man before the eye can even shine purple, fully saving them briefly of the man's clutches. Che, that was too close for my licking. No kidding, I didn't even see that coming. The Septima doesn't move from his place as he seems surprised the lieutenant reacted as fast as he did, but even as he is very impressed by his fast thinking, he doesn't comment on it. Very fast thinking indeed. The only thing that passes by the 9th Squad lieutenant's mind is what a hassle it will be to deal with this man. He secretly curses high luck and how Shiba Taicho just had to give them such a nasty opponent, but he wouldn't cry. After all, better this than a super op espada that the captains would have to deal with. He glances back at the espada. Yup, defiantly better. Hashtag Ichigo vs Ulquiorra hash. 5th Squad Captain Shiba Ichigo. I came here to eliminate threats to Soul Society and restore peace to Hueco Mundo along with my comrades and the help of Primera Espada Stark, Tercera Espada Halibel and former Tercera Nalil. The man just stayed quiet, eyeing the orange-haired man, engaging how truthful he was really being. He could feel other Shinigami present in the area of Las Noches, and that was unacceptable. He is the one in charge of seeing that everything was in order. He obeyed his superiors and nothing else. He had no meaning in life but doing that, following orders until someone stronger came and kicked the former off his ruling and obey that person. He did that as a repetitive cycle. His life holds no meaning. Aizen gave him a meaning. Aizen died. Berrigan ordered him to protect his castle, and that was what he was going to do until told otherwise. Berrigan was the strongest here that was actually issuing orders. Then I shall eliminate your existence and be on my way to do the same with the rest. I would like to see you try. Cuarta Espada Ulquiorra Schiffer. Ichigo just unsheathed both his zanpakuto and shunpo'd forward to meet the other man's zanpakuto as well, surprising the living hell out of him when he starts to push back the other by the strength of his X-shaped attack. What's wrong, Ulquiorra? You're being pushed back. Che. Ulquiorra only strengthened his attack and tried to push back the other man by force, having succeeded even if only slightly, seeing as Ichigo was starting to strain as he hadn't even released his zanpakuto and an espada was someone to be reckoned with, and even more Ulquiorra that happened to have a second release unlike the others. Ichigo made a back flip to separate from the other and held Zangetsu at front, pointing his blade towards Ulquiorra. Bankai. Tensa Zangetsu. Not wanting to jump the bat and release both, he only released Zangetsu to gain the upper hand and make the other release as well. He came back to charge at the pale man with a Ryutsu-induced strike to make it harder on the other. When he came in contact, Ulquiorra wasn't quite ready for an attack of that magnitude and was pushed back completely, crashing into a nearby wall, making the rubble collapse on top of him. Ichigo only stood mesmerized at how simple it was to catch him by surprise, since he didn't know anything about him and how he was winning pretty easily. He was brought back from his thoughts when he heard the recognizable noise of a Sero charging and went into a ready stance on time to see the pale green Sero at the tip of the Cuarta's finger. Sero. His zanpakuto crossed to collide with the menacing and powerful Sero, making him be pushed back slightly as it was pretty powerful. He was surprised when Ulquiorra appeared behind him and fired another one at his vulnerable back. He widened in eyes and wasn't fast enough to separate the two zanpakuto to make one go on each side and was hit at point blank by the Sero. Ulquiorra just stood with his hand in a pocket and the other gripping his sword stronger than ever before. His uniform was very dirty and ripped in various places thanks to the rubble that happened to fall over him. He was waiting for the smoke to clear and see what damage his Sero had done. He hoped that it had done something. after all his opponent was stronger than he thought he would be. When the smoke cleared he couldn't help but widen in eyes when he saw that his back only scorched slightly by the attack but nothing else. His haori was in tatters and a sleeve of his shihakusho was missing, but other than that he seemed pretty much unhurt. What, man, that actually hurt? In Ulquiorra's mind he was thinking how impossible that was after all. A point-blank arrow from someone of his power should have done serious damage, and it only burned slightly his back, nothing that would render him useless in battle or would slow him down much, but he just couldn't understand. He was even more surprised when Ichigo glanced back to look at him with golden yellow eyes that seemed very much evil and very different from the sweet amber he had before. The thing that caught more in curve was the fact that he all of a sudden sent him a maniacal grin that sent chills down his spine. Good thing it won't hurt for much longer. His skin all of a sudden turned back into his sun-kissed color, making it back into a healthy state thanks to his instant regeneration that only made Ulquiorra lose his normally stoic demeanor. Did you know? I'm part hollow, a wizard is what my people are called. That would seem to explain a lot of things. Let's continue with our dance. Ulquiorra, Shiro has been very bloodthirsty lately. Not waiting for the other to be ready, he used Sonito to appear behind him and used a red arrow at point-blank range, mirroring Ulquiorra's previous attack to see the grand difference between both their powers, but Ulquiorra was quick enough to dodge and jumped quickly, creating a hole on the roof of the building and heading for the top of the dome, and Ichigo, knowing what the other was planning, followed right behind. Number 19 #. What's wrong, Halibel? The blonde Espada glanced at the top of the dome of the fake sky, a horrible feeling at the pit of his stomach, something she could not shake aside when it was that overwhelming. Do you feel that? The other brown-haired man pondered at it for a moment before finally realizing what the other was referring to. He really hadn't paid much mind over the various Ryutsus around, because what use would it do to identify them one by one if they were technically at war? As that, Ulquiorra, Halibel nodded, not taking her eyes off the fake blue sky before letting out a long and shaky sigh. She really didn't like being at war with her own people, even if you really couldn't call this a war if you compared it to the one the Shinigami hybrid captain had lived. We have to round everyone up and get rid of the shrimps that Baragon gathered and are still alive. Seeing that they really did need to do their part of the plan, Halibel took her attention back at the matter at hand. She had sent her fraction to gather others, but they also needed to take out the stronger opponents, so instead, on pondering over the green-eyed man that seemed to be fighting the orange head, they started to dash towards the long corridors of Las Noches, trying to do their job. Soy Fawn and Kiraku vs. S. Baragon. Loud crashed were being heard in the large throne room as the current king clashed with the two intruders that happened to find the room. He was as calm as ever, but had already used his resurrection, seeing as he was arrogant enough to say he needed to greet his guests in proper attire fit for a king. Soifan had her shikai out as well as Kiraku, that had light scratches since they knew of Baragon's ability and were able to some extent avoid it. I wouldn't like to disappoint you two, seeing as how you've been very fearful of my ability up until now. If I may, how do you even know of it? They both tensed up, neither wanting to give the Espada any information about their new captain, seeing as it could be used against them. Kiraku, being the calmest of the two, spoke up before the petite captain could, surprising her slightly and scowling, but at the same time understanding. We have our ways, but that's for us to know and you to beware, Espada-san. The current king of Hueco Mundo was disappointed, to say the least. He was expecting to gain some sort of information on the enemy that he would sooner or later make sure to conquer, even if he had to invade the Soul Society completely. Baragon gazed down at the two captains from above in his throne. He narrowed his eyes and got on the defensive by standing up, symboling that the time to talk and play was over. Seeing this as a chance, Soifan dashed forward to give a kick to the head at the Segunda Espada, moving too fast for Kiraku, that was trying to warn her not to get close, being it delayed as her foot was caught faster than what she could comprehend. Not leaving a moment to spare, Baragon grunted and threw the poor petite Shinigami over his head and directly at the wall, making it be destroyed and have a view of the outside. Kiraku quickly shun-PO'd over to where the second squad captain had fallen and went to touch her shoulder, only to see her standing up on her own with a grim look on her face. She slightly groaned in pain, not wanting to show weakness in front of the enemy, but Kiraku was observant enough to realize that it had hurt her bad in the lungs and might make her slower. Remember, he has the ability of senescencia. He can make the time around him go slower and avoid our attacks. We have to be careful with him. Soifan could only nod in response. She really wasn't happy with the outcome. She was expecting the ability but still felt that maybe she held a chance and could be faster than him, but apparently the report the new captain had made was not exaggerating. This is worse than I thought. And the worst of all was that it was just the beginning. They had yet to encounter personally the Resurrection's main ability, Respire. #Nalil vs Shiyelaporo #. As Nell saw the light coming from the end of the endless tunnel she had fell into, she was able to balance her footing to arrive in a crouching position in the middle of the large room, right in front of the other Arankar that had a sadistic smile in place. "What are you planning by bringing me here?" The other's smirk only widened at seeing her with a certain edge in her voice. She was certainly at the defensive, and that only made the pink-haired scientist feel more than satisfied with himself. "Why, I only brought you here to have a friendly chat." Nell only narrowed in eyes and brought a hand to the hilt of her sword, not letting a single opening be seen in her stance. She was being wary of any movement the other made. She couldn't be surprised and would not be caught off guard just because she knew that the pink-haired man was the Octava Espada and would not put much of a fight, her being the former Tercera and all. But still, one could not be over-prepared for everything. "I find it hard to believe that statement." Zale's grin widened more if possible before taking a step forward and spreading his arms outwards like if to give a big hug. "But of course, that was not the reason." "Then too bad, we'll have to do something else. Isn't that right, my precious fraction?" As Zale finishes his sentence, they are both suddenly circled by various Arankar that in their own way are special and different. Nell curses her own carelessness before unsheathing her Zanpakuto that ended up being a good decision. "Go devour her whole." Preparing herself in a ready stance, Nell muttered the first thing that came to mind before going into a fury of disabling her opponents one by one. "What a pitiful man you are, using your fraction instead of coming yourself." #Isshin vs Grimjow #. "What's wrong, Kurosaki? I thought you would put a better fight than this." Isshin groaned at the bunch of rubble he was pushing away to clear a path and be able to stand. He seriously wasn't expecting the other to be so fast and had underestimated him. That was not something he would usually do, so it caught him by surprise. Finally being able to stand, he grasped his Zanpakuto and sighed, shrugging slightly his shoulders in the process. "Looks like this will be harder than I thought. I hope my precious son won't get mad at his daddy." The Sexta Espada raised an eyebrow at the other's chatter, apparently taken aback that the other was talking to himself in such a playful and foolish way. "Huh, what are you blabbing about, old man?" He had to take a double take when Isshin's playful demeanor changed drastically into a serious mode that shocked the other, too drastic and too much of a difference than any previous emotion he had seen on the man. This was going to get serious. "Looks like I can't hold back any longer." Before the Espada could even react, his opponent was out of sight. Frantically searching all around the area to grab sight of the Shinigami, he never found him until he heard a war cry coming from above. Trying to turn around as fast as he could to parry the attack, to no avail, as he was even so starting to sink thanks to the force of said attack. The two swords were shacking thanks to the force, Engetsu obviously gaining upper hand as Grimjow was being sunken even further with each second. When he almost got to his knees thanks to the strength the other was demonstrating, he did a desperate move that could have cost him more than what he came out with. He let go of his sword, leaving only one hand to carry the force of the attack, leaving his free hand to charge the quickest bala he had ever fired. Bala. Seeing this, Isshin didn't give a moment to spare and gave a side step to avoid the attack, but in the process having to separate swords, giving the other chance to make distance with Sonito, but obviously not leaving unscathed. The force of his attack was so great he was able to land a cut to his forearm when it was left to defend the attack alone. Blood dripped from the cut to the tip of the Espada's fingers, leaving a small pool of blood on the white sands. Grimjow was panting to no end, trying to engulf as much air as he could before he would be attacked once again. Gaining enough air, he gritted his teeth and grasped the hilt stronger than ever before. He was starting to see how the situation was not in his favor. Damn Shinigami. Isshin was only ever so serious, a face he had rarely ever showed to his daughters and son, even though he was pretty sure Ichigo already knew it well. He had Engetsu in his grasp, not an opening in sight, and was ready for anything. He would not make that error twice. Giving into his rage and the adrenaline, Grimjow sprung forward to meet the other's sword, only for his opponent to disappear once again. "Over here." He turned around, eyes wide, to see Isshin so very close to him and his Zanpakuto over his head, but it was too late to react and block. He took the attack head-on. Getsuga Tenshou. Once the cloud of smoke cleared up, Ishin was able to finally see his opponent's body. It had a long wound from his shoulder to his lower abdomen on the right side. It was deep but not enough for him to fall over into consciousness yet, maybe from blood loss, but it would take some time. Grimjow had a smug look on his face until he straightened up, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. The moment he opened his eyes, he broke into a mad grin with a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Ha, if you think you've won, then think again, Shinigami, because I'm not done just yet." Grimjow brought his sword in front of him in a slight horizontal way, making claw-like way in his free hand and placing it on top of the blade, seeping blue Ryutsu and making the air around them grow aggressive. Kishire, grind, Pantera. As Grimjow transformed into his released state, he didn't leave a moment to waste as he quickly threw himself onto the ex-captain with a feline war cry. Claw first and jumping with his panther-like legs, he was quickly making his way to where Ishin was standing, promoting him to place his Zanpakuto in front of him in a one-handed grip ready for the attack. As the claw-like hand collided with the sword, Ishin swung his Zanpakuto to the right to shake off the blue-haired male, while with his free hand he moved it in open palm with the words already at the tip of his tongue. Hado number 33, Sokatsui. #Kenpachi vs Noitora #. Come on, Shinigami. Give me a real fight. The two monsters, as they could only be called that, collided many times, sometimes blocking other not even bothering to do so, but the one that held more damage was without a doubt Kenpachi. He had yet to be able to cut the other's skin, claiming it to be impossible to be cut by a Shinigami's Zanpakuto, but Kenpachi never once let that stop him, even going as insane as to stab him directly in his left eye, only to have the misfortune that there was no eye whatsoever, being that the place of Noitora's hollow hole. So now Kenpachi and Noitora's sword were colliding with as much force as possible, and for some reason, Kenpachi being the one winning the current clash, going as far as to break a little part of the other's eight-like Zanpakuto, finally enabling him to lightly cut Noitora in the face. "What I'd tell you, Espada, if I can cut you I can kill you. Make it worth a while, you pansy." Not wasting a moment, they start their own fury of dangerous clashes, lifting the sand into the air and creating an atmosphere full of bloodlust and, more than anything, the will to defeat one another. A fight to the death. Jin and Byakuya vs Yami. The two captains were trying to defeat the giant dinosaur-like man in a way that to any outsider would be absurd. After all, if you have a comrade, it's best to complement each other's abilities and powers to defeat the enemy, but in this case it didn't look like that. No, far from that. It seemed to be a 1vs1 battle, with two of them casually almost hitting each other when trying to attack their sole enemy, and that was not helping. Nay, Baya-kun, shouldn't we stop playin' around? Yami already used his resurrection and our situation ain't helpin'. The 6th squad captain gave a cold glance towards the other's way, but not letting his opponent gain an upper hand on him. He really despised this man, he really did. He can't believe he himself had thought it possible to some way work with him, but he was starting to be unsupportable. Nay, Baya-kun, stop your whining, it's annoying. Trying to avoid a punch that Yami had thrown his way, Jin opened his pale blue eyes slightly to glance at the other that was trying to encase the espada in his petals, to no avail, as Yami seemed to be blowing them off like if they were only flies. The 3rd scud captain stood in the air watching the one-sided fight that seemed to be going on beneath, smirking slightly at how annoyed Yami was and how bored he looked. But the smirk that found his way was quickly replaced when he remembered the thing that was keeping him distracted. "Why are ya taking me? So ya can keep an eye on me? No, I trust you." He really couldn't understand the orange-haired man. He seemed to be so fine, like if nothing could happen to make the situation go wrong, like if he knew everything about everything, and that made him feel at edge. But the thing is, he felt he could trust the man too, even if he felt weird around him, even if the new 5th squad captain seemed to have him on a leash and at the same time not. Maybe I can humor him a little. Feeling it was more than enough playing around, Jin shun-po'd over to where the stoic Kuchiki currently was, watching intently the enraged Espada with cold eyes. "What do you want now?" Jin only gave his signature smirk in return, but never once changed his thoughts on what to do. He had a plan, and maybe this way they could work somewhat together. "Nay, Kuchiki Taicho, how about we give our leader something to praise us on? I bet he would never expect us to work together. How about it?" The other just glanced to the side to see the other smiling in a normal Jin-like way, but for some reason gave out a serious vibe that made him have to take the other seriously. What do you have in mind? Number 19 hash. Kuchiki-san. Rukia glanced behind her to see Hinamori trying to catch up to her. She was just heading towards the Kuchiki manor and was surprised when she heard the 5th Squad Lieutenant calling out to her. Hello Hinamori Fukutecho, what can I do for you? The auburn-haired Shinigami only frowned at the seriousness the other was giving her. They had been somewhat friends in the Shino Academy, so it really didn't please her that she was being that way even if she was a lieutenant. Kuchiki-san, I don't like it when you act so formal with me, so call me Hinamori or Momo like all my friends do. The petite Shinigami only widened in eyes at the statement. She really couldn't find it in herself to do something that disrespectful. After all, Hinamori was a lieutenant. But I can't do that. I would never be able to act so disrespectful. Hinamori only pouted and placed her hands at her hips, giving a serious yet slightly amusing gaze her way. No way, you're my Taicho's best friend and also my friend, so I want you to call me Momo and I'll call you Rukia, how about that? Rukia could only look at the lieutenant straight in the eye, and before she even realized what she was doing she opened her mouth to say something she might regret later. Ichigo is not my best friend, he's my fiancé. Hinamori widened in eyes this time and couldn't help but gape like a fish. She looked around to see if anyone was near before stepping forward and placing one hand in each of Rukia's shoulders, looking directly in the eyes with a seriousness she would have never expected to be able to muster. He's what? My fiancé. The 5th Squad Lieutenant only blinked to clear her surprise, going limp and letting her hands fall off the other's shoulders. She was lost in daze before everything clicked and she could finally comprehend what she was told, and as quick as she could, she grasped Rukia's shoulders once more. Then all the more reason to do so. I won't expect you to call me anything but Momo and I'll call you Rukia. No buts whatsoever. Seeing as there was no room for debate, Rukia nodded in understanding, trying to get the other to let go of her shoulders. Okay, now that is cleared. Hinamori stood back before nodding to herself and embracing Rukia in a hug, surprising the petite Shinigami further with the enthusiasm the lieutenant was showing. Congratulations on your engagement, Rukia. I hope you'll be happy with your life, and do me a favor, take care of Taicho, we both know how much he needs it. Rukia softened up at the affection and returned the hug before breaking into a warm smile. Thank you, and I'll make sure to take care of that idiot. Having a thought cross her mind, Rukia couldn't help but tighten the hug, confusing Hinamori until she spoke up, making the gesture make sense. I just hope he comes back. #Ichigo vs Ulquiorra #. Not taking a moment of hesitation, Ichigo followed Ulquiorra to the top of Las Noches. Ichigo knew how Ulquiorra was always one to follow the rules, and this rule in particular was one he knew very well. An espada with ranking higher than 4 can't release his or her Zanpakuto inside of Las Noches. Though Ichigo doubted Barragan, the current ruler, cared for those kind of things, but instead of pondering on that fact he shrugged it off and continued to follow Ulquiorra through the hole he had created at the top of the dome. It seems I shouldn't have underestimated you in the way I did. I shall eradicate you on the current king's orders and avenge Aizen-sama at the same time. Ulquiorra's gaze was as cold as always, and Ichigo couldn't help but return the gaze with one equally as cold as his opponent. Too bad Ichigo's golden black eyes were ones that could make the coldest man shiver, and as such Ulquiorra couldn't help but feel weary. With each minute that goes by he looks more and more hollow. Just what is he? Not wasting a moment, Ulquiorra brought his Zanpakuto to stand vertically in front of him before muttering his release with his normal monotone voice. In close, Murcielago. As dark green Ryutsu covered the man as he transformed into his more bat-like appearance that made him look frightful to a new level. Before Ichigo could even blink, which wasn't necessary since that wouldn't have hindered him in the least, Ulquiorra sprung forward to parry with the orange head that seemed to be as emotionless as the other, and incredibly, turning paler and paler in a slow manner that was barely noticeable. The two clashed, leaving a shockwave to form by the attack. Thanks to the force of said movement, the two started to go in a flurry of attacks that were being parried perfectly each and every time, Ichigo not in the least worried by the attacks. Oh, I'm so excited, let's slaughter him, Kingy. Ichigo only shook his head, confusing slightly his opponent. He wasn't about to kill the poor Quarto just because Shiro was overly excited all of a sudden. That was not something he wanted for the espada, especially since at the end of the war he had started to show much doubt in Aizen's orders before he was killed by his own master. It had just taken too long for him to realize, so Ichigo wanted more than anything to spare the pale man. We can't, and you know very well why. Che, you're no fun, but I'm still inching closer to you by the second. Let me have a little bit of fun. It's been so long since you've used my powers, I'm just itching. Ichigo could only roll his eyes at his apparent desperate hollow. He wouldn't deny him the pleasure even so, and here he could use his hollow side without fearing for others' well-being, so it wouldn't be bad to use those powers right now. It would help make some well-pent-up stress leave him and would make Shiro calmer in the days to come, something that was always welcome on the Orange Head's book. Not really putting a fight against his hollow's Ryutsu lingering dangerously by each second, he concentrated on the fight and decided it would be better to actually get somewhat serious, so Ulquiorra would do so as well. Double. Ichigo started to gather a normal Getsuga Tenshou, with the difference that it started to travel up his arm and onto his other into Muramasa's blade. Getsuga Tenshou. The double surprised greatly the other man, and as such he was not prepared for the giant attack that was fired his way, making it hit straight on and having him engulfed by the monstrosity of the blast. Ichigo stood silently in midair. He was already pale white and had his long orange hair in a very messy manner, his yellow eyes surrounded in a pitch black. His Bankai coat moved with the wind of the lonely night as he waited for the attack to dissipate and see the damage on poor Ulquiorra. He stood as calm as ever, no emotion betraying his intimidating posture as he waited with a patience he acquired over the hard years that passed. The cloud dissipated and in the ground was a panting Ulquiorra. His robes were more than tattered and his left arm was completely missing. He glanced up to see his opponent and he couldn't help but widen in eyes at the sight. Right before his very eyes a type of horns started to emerge from Ichigo's head. They seemed to be hollow-like and obviously made of the same material the masks are made, and it was very disturbing. This man, who is he? Is that pity, regret in his eyes? Ichigo's eyes were menacing with the golden and black, but without a doubt held sadness for the Espada. He really didn't want to kill the poor guy, he just couldn't find it in himself to kill him, even with Shiro's bloodthirsty thoughts lingering so close to being his. I shall find a way. Che, suit yourself. Not even stopping to look at the other man, Ichigo charged with both his Zanpakuto grasped securely in his hands, his Bankai Tensei Zangetsu and his new partner Muramasa still in his sealed state, but nothing the less serving as an extension of his body. Come Ulquiorra, fight with everything you have, or else it will be too late to regret. Ulquiorra could only narrow his eyes at the Orange Head. He was becoming more and more of a mystery by the time went on, and he just couldn't read this man. He couldn't underestimate him one bit, but what was making him clouded with anger was because of the look his opponent was giving him. His opponent was underestimating him. He shall regret looking at me that way and asking me to fight with everything I have. So, without a moment to spare, Ulquiorra blocked Ichigo's half-assed attack and pushed him aside as he started to radiate black and pale green Ryutsu, surrounding him like type of ribbons flowing from the floor above. His usual stoic eyes, the menacing Ryutsu, the pale white skin, everything about him was something bone-chilling. Allow me to educate you. Behold true despair. The air grew thicker, the winds grew desperate and in turmoil. They would more than be enough to choke any being stupid enough to approach the two opponents, but more than anything it represented perfectly the true meaning of despair that the pale man represented. It was perfect. Resurrection. Segunda etapa. As an explosion of Ryutsu was seen from miles away, the lone opponent of the one transforming parted slightly pale white lips to mutter words that only the wind was able to catch as they flew away along with his long orange locks. The things reflected in my eyes hold no meaning. The things that can't be reflected in my eyes do not exist. There is nothing in you and in me. His golden and black eyes seemed to disappear along with the breeze as the words were muttered and were being replaced by a pale brown, a brown that held no meaning, a brown that seemed so lonely. The brown that the orange-haired Shinigami hybrid held was a brown that had nothing. The last words seemed to echo throughout the entire Las Noches as they reached every last nook of the place. Even flying through the sands enough to be heard but only recognized by a certain ex-captain that couldn't help but feel his son's pain even if it was completely foreign to him. There is nothing in you and in me. Number 20 #. The tall ceilings of Las Noches rumbled, bits and pieces falling apart thanks to the powerful clash of powerful beings. All was silent as the fury of attacks never died down, leaving a fright inscribed in every soul that happened to be unlucky enough to be close to the fight. The sands twisted in turmoil, causing tornadoes and sandstorms, making the poor, weak hollows shelter in any nook available. The clashes interrupted fights that seconds ago were ongoing, the strikes numbed the senses of those that kept in fighting despite the pressure, the assaults reminded everyone that they were currently at war, but most of all, it showed them how much need there was to win. Battles that had already ended made the field silencer, struggles that had finished now seemed to be easy and simple compared to the one going on at the top of them all. Fights like that of Nalil vs Shielapuro that had concluded in the easiest way possible when Nell gave a strike impossible to dodge once she saw how badly the man treated his fraction. An attack that frightful indeed had been, since she had been shortly blinded with rage and sympathy for the poor hollows that were stupid enough to follow the pink-haired man. Fights like that of Renji and Hisagi that had ended up wounded and in need of medical treatment but nothing threatening enough to brag. Battle that had finished when they were able to overpower the chocolate-colored man upon constant attacks and patterns that would have confused any, and as they had already known the power of the espada, were able to counter it rather nicely. Those two had finished rather nicely, and as Hisagi and Renji made way towards the entrance they had used, Nell had finally found the current Tercera and Primera, deep into the hallways of Las Noches, accompanied by the former's only fraction. When she sonidoed over to them, the group of three turned to greet their new comrade, knowing who it was and that it wasn't an enemy even if they had yet to actually interact with her. "Sorry I'm late. I had to take care of some other business before meeting up." The two nodded before giving a brief glance towards the way Nell had come, being rather surprised that a trial of weak Arankar had followed right behind. The Primera returned his gaze to the former Tercera, gesturing at the group behind her with his head since he was rather unwilling to take his hands out of his pockets. "You have a nice group there, Nalil." Nell smiled before looking back, not an ounce of remorse as she thought of the scientist she had killed in order to have the current group of Arankars free rather than locked. She looked back at the threesome while keeping her warm smile, liking her previous actions even if she had gone a little far. "Yes, I like it, and I know they'll like it too, because I won't let anything happen to them, and I know that we can win this so that no one will have to suffer any longer." The blonde Tercera balled her hand into a fist as she thought of her fraction that had yet to return, as they had been recollecting any Arankar or numero that was left. They had gathered every single one of them in a secured room, so now it was only a matter to see if there was any left. "Stark, I'm gonna take these dipsticks to the habitation. Better there than causing a ruckus here." The Primera yawned lazily as he was suddenly elbowed in the ribs, grunting lightly from the pain but otherwise unaffected. He glanced down to look at his fraction while just nodding, not really showing care but clearly demonstrating it through the windows of his soul, which just so happened to be the eyes. "All right, just be careful." The small Arankar frowned, kicking the espada in the shin even if she knew that he wouldn't be hurt at all. She strode past Nalil and towards the group of noisy Arankar, gaining their attention and making them follow her the way they had come, leaving the three powerful espada and ex-espada alone. "Everything is finished already. We were thinking of going to confront Barragan." Nell frowned, glancing at her predecessor with some sort of disapproval in her eyes. She didn't like the idea of going to the current king of Hueco Mundo. He was in battle at the moment, and if they went it would just be prolonged even more. "He's fighting our comrades. What do you wish to gain by going into the battlefield?" The two raised an eyebrow, taken aback by the new piece of information. Apparently they were finally able to find out exactly who was fighting the Segunda. "So the ones that are fighting Barragan are from the Shinigami." The former Tercera nodded while checking the other fight state, wanting to know who had finished or how they were progressing. She was surprised when she noticed a rather familiar Ryutsu diming down. "Number 20 hash. Fuck, 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 fuck. What the hell do you think you're doing, you Shinigami scum? Che, you're worthless, an utter disappointment. I would have thought you would pack a better punch." The tall lanky figure was crouching down on one knee, blood flowing rather earnestly from his side that had a mean gash from hip to shoulder. The man spit out blood as previously white uniform turned more and more red. He reached out for the blade that laid helplessly at his side with one of his still functional 6 arms. He was stopped when a Waraji-clad foot stomped on his hand, making the espada grunt in pain and halt on his move completely, looking up to glance at the owner of said foot, trying to give the best death glare he could to no avail as he was starting to have problems seeing through his hazed eye. "Useless waste of time, and I thought it would be fun when I realized it was nearly impossible to cut you up." The tall, Broad Shinigami captain scoffed and turned tail to leave, wanting more than anything to get away from the boring fight he was suddenly forced to participate in. The Espada didn't take no for an answer as he stood up with the last of his strength to attack Kenpachi's unguarded back, only to widen an eye when the 11th squad captain embraced the attack head-on. The blade connected with skin, but skin was hardly grazed, not really causing damage that could be considerable considering the current fight state. Kenpachi took out the weird-shaped blade from his flesh, not even caring when blood dripped out and onto the floor. He lifted his own nameless blade and strikes downwards in a furry attack that hit the stunned Espada like a tornado, not really comprehending the move until it was too late, and too much blood loss affecting his better judgment and not dodging. A rain shower of blood tainted the pure white sands, droplets of red-colored water falling on the ground with the Espada following right behind with a loud thud. Kenpachi glanced down at the slowly dying Espada before scuffing once more, striding away from the previous battlefield into a crumbled piece of pillar that had a small bundle of black and pink in the middle. "Oi, Yakiru, we're leaving." Said person just so happened to be the small bundle, and upon hearing her name she stood up and jumped on Kenpachi's bare shoulder. Ken-chan didn't have fun. Che, it was funner fighting with Ichigo. Once we get back I'm going to make him fight me for giving me such a boring opponent. The small 11th squad lieutenant seemed to ponder on the fact before finally realizing what it meant. She broke into a wide smile and threw her arms up in the air to show her excitement before yelling out with a laugh how fun it would be. Kenpachi on the other hand turned to look at the now dead Espada and his discarded Haori that was near the lanky, dead figure, thinking how bothersome it would be to go pick it up, and instead walked away, thinking about finding another fight and maybe finding the others. How bothersome. Number 20 hash. I see, it might work. Of course it will work, by Akun. I can assure you there is nothing Shinso can't cut. The 6th squad captain glanced to look at the 3rd squad captain, not liking having to work with him in particular but not having a choice on that matter. He once again turned to look at their idiotic opponent and couldn't help but feel sorry for Aizen that his top and most powerful Espada happened to be the stupidest. He wondered how the traitor felt about it, obviously pissed. Byakuya gave out a non-audible sigh before retracting his deadly petals into his normal, sealed sword, looking at the white-haired man before sending a glare his way. This better work or it will all have been for naught and we'll end up having to cut the Espada up into he drops. The fox-like man in response just widened his smile before lifting the small, dagger-like Zanpakuto to his eye level, wanting to show off the small blade and move it in a playful way. Don't ya worry Baya, everything shall go as planned. Byakuya once more sent a glare directed to Jin, not really wanting to trust the man but having no choice in the current situation. After all, the fox had not told him what his Bankai was and now he wanted to use that Bankai that was still a secret to kill the Espada. Instead of debating more he concentrated on their opponent, directing his slight anger towards the dark-skinned man that the pale white fox. Byakuya stood in front of the Espada and twirled his sword so that the tip was in direction of the floor, letting go of it to release once more his Bankai. Bankai, Sanbosakura Kegiyoshi. The large blade-like figures dispersed into a great horde of sakura petals, making an incredible shower of pink while circling its owner in an everlasting dance of pride and honor. You still trying to kill me with your petty flowers? I told you it won't work. Byakuya lifted his right arm with a perfect stance of secureness while sending the blades to follow his commands and attack the giant Espada. The blades went directly towards the Zero in an upfront attack, trying to keep him distracted in the attack and not on his other opponent. Meanwhile Jin had moved to a secluded area where he was away from the battlefield but was close enough to see every move made by the two. He opened slightly his eyelids so that pale blue came in sight in a way that if anyone were present they wouldn't have been able to avoid the chills. Jin crouched slightly to extend his Zanpakuto, knowing exactly what he would do and when. Now he was just waiting for that exact moment, and when the pink flower petals that composed Sanbonsakura twirled in a fierce tornado right in front of Yami while blocking said person's sight, he struck, fast and swift so that no one would have expected the attack, and went right in the middle of the turmoil, knowing that the 6th squad captain would open up a path the moment the blade started to pierce through the pink. And so he did, making the long, menacing blade go past the Espada's defenses and making the attack successful in piercing the strong arrow. Jin retracted his own Zanpakuto in his small dagger-like state while waiting with a mischievous smile to show how much he would surprise the two. Ha! What was that all about? Just cutting me up once won't do much to serve your cause. I'm still standing. I will. He stopped mid-sentence with a startled expression, not really comprehending his former comrade's current expression. What would seem to be wrong, Yami? I thought you were going to give us a long speech of your power. Jin shrugged his shoulders, shaking his head in the process to show his cluelessness and deception before looking back at the espada, pointing his small zanpakuto at the espada. Nay, Yami-chan, did you know what the power of my zanpakuto's bankai is? This seemed to intrigue not only the espada but the 6th squad captain, as both perked up ears to hear rather intently what the silver-haired man was about to say. My bankai's true ability, as well as its deadliest aspect, is not based on its length or speed, but rather its ability to turn into dust for just a second when it expands and contracts. There is a deadly poison inside the blade that dissolves and breaks down cells. And guess what, Yami-chan? A piece of my blade just so happened to be left inside you when I cut through your skin. This made the espada widen in eyes as the meaning of this new revelation left him with an unavoidable fear. But before he could even think of a retort, Jin pointed towards the dark-skinned man and muttered in a cold, unforgiving tone. Bankai, Kamishini no Yari. Number 20 hash. Who the hell gave you permission to pity me, Kurosaki? I'm not pitying you, it's just being considerate. Well, stop doing that. But I have to obey my beautiful son Ichigo. What are you, a 6-year-old? The father puts the rules. Oh, but Ichi's the commanding officer, so too bad. He gave specific orders to not kill you. What kind of fucked up logic is that? Sparing your enemies. I'm gonna kill that fucker for belittling me. Isshin glanced to look at the mangled form of the Sexta Espada, thinking how he could yell and protest when he was practically bleeding to death. The elder Kurosaki shrugged and moved his arm so that he could better support the espada before wincing, feeling the pain go down his spine as he hurt his worst injury in the process. As he did, he thought back to the end of the fight, which just so happened to be pretty close since he hadn't released his bankai, getting too exhausted in battle and being unable to release it. Isshin looked back at the brunette, having a good idea while changing his thoughtful expression into a wide grin, lifting his free hand to ruffle the espada's somewhat long blue locks. Oi, what the hell do you think you're doing? I like you. You remind me of my son when he was younger. Grimjow made a confused face, thinking how it was possible to compare himself to the uncaring and calm orange head he had seen before. He was shocked even more when the man started babbling more about his so-called boy and actually acting casual with someone that was previously an enemy. Ah, they grow up so fast. My own son is getting married soon. I know you two would get along well. Why don't you come to his wedding? It could be fun. He widened in eyes thinking of all the crazy stuff the man would keep on talking about and couldn't help but wince in sympathy for the orange head that would have to bear with the man for the rest of his life. Maybe, just maybe, he could get along with the mission's current commander, at least to complain about the Raven head together. Number 20 hash. Respira. The two captains jumped to avoid the fretful attack, wanting more than anything to get away and not get caught up as to not lose a limb or something worse. The espada had already released his resurrection. All the attacks they sent his way were either stopped or just plainly dodged thanks to the ability of senescencia that made time around them stop. Even Kyoraku's games were avoidable for the espada, and the worst they had done to the old man is a discreet yet very much there gash to his side. Kyoraku glanced to look at the petite captain, thinking how lucky she had been to have barely avoided losing an arm but still holding up like in the beginning. It was real bothersome to know how exhausted both were even when they didn't show it, and the worst thing was that an indoor fight was not beneficial to them. He turned to look at the giant opening they had made to the wall sometime in the battle and couldn't help but feel it was an escape route, so he did the first thing that came to mind. He grabbed Soifan's collar from behind and dragged her out of the throne room and into the chilly sands under the artificial sun. The first thing he noticed upon landing on the sand was that there was another 3 Arankar outside, one he instantly recognized as an ally. Nell-chan, what are you doing out here? Before Nell could even hope to respond, Soifan interrupted, wanting more than anything to get let down and doing everything in her power to not yell at the senior captain in aggravation. Kyoraku Taicho, please put me down. The 8th squad captain realized what he was doing, knowing that the smaller captain was sure to be doing everything in her power to not kick him off. He put her down while checking that she wasn't badly injured and that she could still hold her own. Soifan on the other hand was pissed that her stealth and close-quarter combat was mostly of no use since they were weary of the Espada's ability and tried to keep their distance. She cursed the bad matching they had made in opponent but wasn't about to back down. After all, she was chosen for this mission by him and she would not give him a new reason to make fun of her. Nell, seeing that she finally had the clear to speak up, did so, apprehension very much noticeable in her voice. "We came to confront Berrigan, but I can see that the fight isn't going quite as planned." The older captain shook his head, very much agreeing with Soifan on the fact that their opponent was troublesome and that it was hard to fight him when the Espada had such a deadly ability. They were brought back from their musing when a loud explosion brought their attention, looking back at a new gaping hole that had appeared thanks to the recent BAM, making them widen in eyes at the sight that greeted them and causing Halibel and Stark growl in anger. Number 20 hash. When Kiraku took Soifan out of the previously spectacular throne room, Berrigan couldn't help but growl in anger, hating it when he had to go and look for his prey. He was about to go out to follow them when a muffled sound brought his attention. He glanced to look at the direction of the sound when he spotted his fraction along with Lolly and Mainoli that happened to be carrying something rather interesting. He smirked, thinking of the great possibilities he could do with this new variable and how it would make his fight ensured and easier than ever. He walked towards the 8 Arankar, making their captives squirm in fear of the powerful Segunda that seemed to be ready to try something that involved them. Lilinet was the only one that didn't look affected by the powerful presence, seemingly used to being around stronger spiritual pressure and not wanting to show her fear on the outside. She just hated how she was captured so easily along with the Tercera's fraction. She glared at the man, wanting to yell at him and ask what he was going to do but being unable thanks to the gag she had, being immobilized along with the other 3 females and being unable to do anything. "You 7 did a good job. Now, follow me." Berrigan grabbed the nearest of the gauged Arankar that just so happened to be Lilinet by the collar, dragging her through the newly made hole and being followed right behind by the fraction. He gazed around the area to see his 2 opponents accompanied by another 3 he hadn't known were there but made what he was going to do even more satisfactory. He grinned like a madman, loving how Stark and Halibel started to shake in rage upon seeing their captured fraction and enjoying the sight before him. He could tell that of all the 5 only one was not visibly affected, and that was the temperamental, petite captain. He could tell the other captain was also affected even if he really didn't show it, and that just made it better. He knew that it would be pretty much impossible for them to try something when he had the 4 in his grasp. He laughed, loving how he now had his kingdom perfectly in his grasp with the Tercera and Primera in his grasp and knowing that the feudal battle would be over before anyone noticed. "This is brilliant, spectacular. Look at you, the powerful Primera being lowered to a vicious dog on a leash." Berrigan smirked once more before lifting up Lilinet so that they could all see her, making her choke slightly thanks to being lifted by the collar. "And this is that leash." He laughed once more, enjoying very much the situation and knowing that everything was under his control and not anyone else. He knew he had won, he marveled his victory, and everything was just according to the plan. Boom. He widened in eyes, being completely shocked by the sudden explosion that occurred behind him, and knowing that it would be bad thanks to his opponent's expressions and the chills he felt go down his spine. He turned, ever so slowly, to look at the cloud of dust that seemed to be dissipating and letting them see what had happened, and what he saw shocked them to the very core. There, standing imposingly, surrounded by the corpse of his fraction along with Lolly and Mainoli but with the other 3 safe and sound, with the limp form of the Quarto, was none other than a tall orange-haired Hollow. Number 21 hash. Tendrils of terror clearly radiated from the previous Segunda Espada. The other Arankar just stood stunned in place along with the present Shinigami as they all stared at the imposing figure before them. The bone-chilling form that brought goosebumps forth with the bull-like horns and pale white skin, the unfocused brown eyes that looked like that of a dead man, but this person, this being was anything but dead. He was very much alive, and that terrorized those present even if they were somewhat able to recognize the newcomer. The Quarto Espada hanging limply under a pale white arm did nothing to ease the self-imposed king of Hueco Mundo, it did nothing to appease the terror that kept on bubbling up, and it obviously did not relax the Orange-Head's comrades because he looked unforgiving and aloof of everything. "Berrigan Lusenbairn, you don't change, do you?" "What do you mean?" The sudden smirk that graced the pale white features only made the goosebumps increase. The unease and uncertainty just seemed to elevate to new levels and make the powerful Segundo want to submit and fall to his knees, because this being looked as if he knew every single thing about him while he knew nothing. Always hiding like a coward behind an innocent. How far the mighty have fallen. See, coward, you say? How dare you? I am your king Arankar, you must. The sudden pressure on his shoulders made him stop as he looked once more into the other's face, all hint of amusement gone as he only had a cold gaze. You take me as an Arankar. Well, that's fine by me, but a coward is still a coward, past, present and future, always. The Segundo was gasping now, feeling a sudden fear that he had not felt before fall completely on his shoulders, and he was rather sure that it was not Ryutsu, it was something completely foreign, it was sheer presence. All of a sudden a groan came from the limp figure of an Arankar everyone had taken for dead. The orange head glanced down to look at the raven head and shifted his arm to get a better grip, since he had started to move and might fall if the movements continued. The Quarto moved once more and this time lifted his head to send a cold glare to the other, gaining nothing in response since they were both kinda similar when it came to cold stares. Did you have to carry me all the way down? Well, we didn't exactly have time and you're still not regenerated enough to go at my speed, so yeah, I did have to carry you. Nonsense. Upon hearing the other complain, Ichigo could hardly suppress the smile that threatened to show on his face, completely eradicating the previous aloof demeanor that had Baragan subdued and everyone else in a trance. Oh really? I beg to differ. Can you stand now? Ulquiorra gave a roll of his eyes upon hearing the slight concern in the orange head's tone, but said nothing of it, only sparing him a court nod so that he would know that it was okay to let go and also let him concentrate on the only espada left of the resistance. As Ichigo placed the Quarto down, he turned to look at the still-tied fraction of the Tercera espada, giving them the kindest smile he could muster while in his current menacing form to put them at ease before kneeling by their side, while completely ignoring the rising rage of the Segunda and the obvious nerves that were radiating from his comrades. Don't worry, everything will end soon. The next thing that occurred was too fast for anyone to even realize what had. The three Espada and ex-Espada along with the two Shinigami captains all widened in eyes as Nell yelled to warn the orange head of the upcoming danger that came from behind. They were all frightened for Ichigo and the fraction along with the Quarto Espada, seeing as the Segunda was no longer restrained by fear and was charging an attack, ready to eradicate the five of them and being very close to doing so only for the attack to collide with thin air. Baragan, completely surprised, turned to look behind him to see where his parry had gone to, coming to a complete halt as he shuddered from the bone-chilling voice that was heard from his side. So close by he quickly turned to make sure no attack came his way, but at the same time too far for it to have been a whisper since he heard it loud and clear. Coward, I told you, didn't I? Attacking the enemy from behind. If that's not a coward, then there must be something rather off here. Baragan quickly turned his gaze back towards the group of three Arankar and two Shinigami, seeing that four had been added to the team and the only one out of his sight just so happened to be the most dangerous one. He tightened his grip on the bundle that he was still carrying, causing a low and muffled whimper to escape his hostage as he tried to look around for the orange head, fear and apprehension quite obvious in his stance and posture, his bones almost shacking from the terror he felt in the inside which was hidden beneath rage. How dare you call me a coward? I am the king of Hueco Mundo and you shall all bow down to me. The only response he gained was a sudden and very much impossible to dodge punch square on his skull, sending him flying all the way back into the throne room, leaving everyone wondering what the hell had happened while turning from the place where the king of Hueco Mundo stood to where Ichigo was standing next to them, since the only thing they had been able to distinguish was an orange blur. What the hell just happened? The one that actually voiced out everyone's thoughts was in fact Stark, that was still quite worried for his still captured fraction, even if he knew that the attack wouldn't have harmed her since Baragan had taken the full impact, but was still apprehensive and wanting more than anything to get his other half back at his side. Well, that was Gemelo Sonido. I think you two might know it from the now dead Septima Espada, but who knows, you Espada were always so stiff around each other. The two Espada seemed taken aback by the newfound information, knowing what Gemelo Sonido was, even if Zamari was never someone social or that boosted about their skills, but being a high-ranking Espada had its advantages. Halibel had already gone to untie her fraction along with Nell's help so that the rest could stay alert, waiting for a certain coward to come out and play. Ulquiorra, which everyone had thought was dead up until now, was standing as aloof as always, while Kiraku and Stark were relaxed but very much paying attention. Ichigo, on the other hand, had closed his eyes and was stretching out his senses to make out their current situation, happy to sense that all the fighting was over and that some of them were even making their way towards them, everyone except Kenpachi, that was still pretty far off. He's not coming out. No, he's planning something. I'm sure of it. Soifin turned to look at their commander, even if she didn't really recognize him as such, and couldn't help but feel disgust for the hollow appearance Ichigo had, even if he was still wearing the 5th Squad Haori. She just couldn't get used to the idea of having a hollow in the ranks, even if said hollow saved them from a great war. She tried to push her feelings aside and gave a neutral expression, wanting to gain some answers as to what he had meant. Why do you think he's planning? Ichigo, on the other hand, still had his eyes closed as he concentrated on the flicker of Ryutsu in the building, following every single thing he felt and trying to decipher Baragon's intentions. He's moving in there. As the orange head said this, everyone was now looking at him. Even the impassive Quarto held a shimmer of newfound curiosity as Ichigo's eyes opened once more to reveal gold against black, his white skin and menacing hollow, bull-like horns disappearing and returning to his normal state, with the exception of his eyes that looked hollower than before. Ichigo-kun, I think now is not a good time to drop your transformation. Upon being called, he turned to look at the 8th Squad captain, understanding his apprehension but not being able to do anything to ease it, as he was only able to give a small understanding smile. I can't really maintain it too long. It'll only deplete my Ryutsu reserves if I keep it on, but don't worry, I still have access to my hollow side, only weaker. All of a sudden the sound of Flash step was heard behind them, signaling the arrival of their comrades, but at the same time distracting them from their current situation, as they really weren't expecting what happened next. Don't look away, Shinigami. The sudden appearance was all but expected for some and completely surprising for others, as Kiraku was more than ready to make the Segunda back away with a blast of Kido without incantation to give them a moment to breathe and get everything back in control. The bastard had been waiting for the perfect distraction, and he had moved when he had found it. Shit, where is he now? The next thing everyone noticed was the still form of the skeleton-like figure. Finally being able to see the crack on his right had increased and was now missing a big part of said side. Ichigo, how hard did you hit him? Well, Nell, remember I had my hierro at full force when I punched him, so I'm guessing somewhere around very hard. The answer honestly made all those present sweat drop and turn to look at their leader, thinking that it was a very vague answer and wanting to question for some, not for the first time, their commander. Oh, K, that was an accurate answer. The new and unfamiliar voice to some startled them and made those present turn and look in the direction where the raspy and a little strained voice came from, finding it rather hilarious to see the previous 10th Squad captain carrying the mighty Sexta Espada and apparently being rather comfy, as if they were all buddy-buddy. And you were burned to a crisp by Goat Face's Getsuga Tenshou, so shut up. This only made Grimjow glare at the orange head, not being able to do anything else as he could barely stand as is. But as soon as their attention was brought to the newcomers, it was gone, as Stark decided to growl at Baragon's form that was once more coming out of the smoke, all calm and collected, which looked weird since he was pissed off mere minutes ago. Where's Lilinet? Upon hearing the rather hostile noise radiating from the Primera, Baragon couldn't help but laugh, enjoying the leash he had on the powerful Espada and not feeling threatened at all. Your fraction. Well, she's rather comfortable inside of a barrier I made using Respira. I could no longer afford to leave my defenses down and was in need of my senescencia. 1. This made those present widen in eyes, as they actually knew of Baragon's ability thanks to Ichigo's report. His Respira being the purple miasma he uses to age and eventually kill that around him at long range, and his senescencia being his defenses as anything close by or anything that makes contact with him also ages. Ichigo and those calmest in the current situation tried to keep their defenses up while searching for the purple barrier the fraction was most likely trapped in, only to be spotted in between the rubble and not that far away. Any false move and she dies, remember. She is the only restraint I have left and I will use it. The new variable made those still able to fight tense. Nobody wanting to risk moving and making the fraction die, and at the same time not wanting to stay still and do nothing, or else the mission would have been for naught and nothing would have been able to be done. If any of you are alive, it's because I've let you live until now, but that ends. She moves, she dies, anyone else gets near, they die as well, so don't even try. That was all he got to say before an orange blur passed right by him, passing completely his defenses and not being able to do a thing as his eyes followed the afterimage of what he suspected to be the 5th squad captain, only widening in eyes as he saw his destination and not being able to believe he would be as stupid as to approach his Respira when he had just gave out a warning. Everyone else was also surprised at this, barely even having time to yell out Ichigo's name in fear for his most probable death. Wanting more than anything to follow behind but knowing the Segunda would do anything to stop them since it was apparent that Baragan would let Ichigo get to the barrier to teach the rest a lesson if his sudden smirk was anything to go by. But what surprised everyone was the sudden balla that Ichigo fired at the side of the purple miasma and how he suddenly reached in through the small hole that he had created. Surely getting in touch with the miasma but looking as if it were not of his concern. As Ichigo reached inside he was able to grab the still-tied fraction and pull her out without letting her touch the Segunda's technique even if he didn't have the same luck, quickly turning back to his awaiting comrades as he dodged the miasma that had started to go after him and arriving just in time with the rest to be protected inside a barrier that the newly arrived 6th squad captain placed. "Ichigo, are you alright?" "I'm alright, just wait a second." The orange head shifted the Arankar in his arm to pass her to the awaiting Primera, earning himself a thanks before glancing to look at the barrier and then back at Byakuya. "That barrier won't last long. It will rot away any minute now. At least it'll earn us sometime. Your arm wasn't damaged." The 5th squad captain bit his lip as he finally lifted his left arm to see the rapidly disappearing skin and bones, thanking whatever got out there that his rapid regeneration was slowing down the process and most likely preventing it from going further than his fingers. "It's slowly aging but I'll do something about it." "Son, what do you have in mind?" Ichigo turned to look at his father, trying to ignore the feeling slowly disappearing from his hand and trying to concentrate on Ishin that was still supporting a battered Grimmjow. He looked back from his father to his hand and without even thinking he cut it off, surprising even the Segunda Espada that was about to eradicate the barrier as the blood dripped out of his newly self-created injury. "What the hell?" Ichigo turned to look at the blue net, feeling amusement upon seeing those shocked expressions that came from everyone except Ulquiorra that already knew what the orange head was about to do. Surprising everyone further when his hand started to regrow and replace his previous dying one. "See, problem resolved. You're insane just like your dad. I would never cut off my hand like that." The orange head just shrugged at that, not feeling anything upon being insulted as he thought it was nothing compared to being called monster in his own time. It gave an empty feeling and was not something to enjoy, almost as if he was hollow. "How ironic is that? Skay, I can go with insane. But for now we have to leave out the insane part and concentrate on killing this bastard. Any plan, Shiba Taicho?" He turned to look at the 6th squad captain and future brother-in-law, giving a lazy smile as he said his next words that in a way shocked them all but at the same time made them wonder why in the world they were following the guy in the first place. "None. You're kidding, right, Ichi?" "Nope. My best plan right now is win, so that's what we're going to do. I take my previous comment of you being as insane as your dad back. You're worse than him, and that's saying something." Ichigo just turned to look at the rest of his companions, knowing full well that the barrier was about to crumble down as he could see the Kido reaching its limit and having to jump away the next second but wanting to say something else before. "Like I said, I can go with insane." And then the unbelievable happened. He jumped out of the miasma's way along with everyone else and threw his sheaves along with Zanpakuto to the flustered 2nd squad captain and Nell, giving one to each before charging at the Segunda and hitting the skeleton-like figure head on and barely showing sign of being affected as his rapid generation healed just as fast as the miasma affected him. Being able to throw the other man into the rubble once more thanks to his Ryutsu-induced kick. "Well, that's a plan, I guess. Bastard. Why are you still alive? Why are you pushing me back? How?" At that all Ichigo could do was smirk, not really caring that the moment he depleted his Ryutsu reserves he would probably die and not minding the idea so long as he was able to protect everyone else. That's what happens when the unexpected happens. Remember this for as long as you live, which won't be long by the way. Strength is a product of the unexpected along with experience. You bitch. Number 21 #. So what happened in the end? The leader of the rebels was taken down by Shiba Taicho along with the rest of the invasion team with the help of the Espada that were allowed to live and ended up making a peaceful treaty in the meantime. The discussion of the details was agreed to be held in a week's time once everything settled down and they were able to talk it off with their own side. Once everything was finished and any emergency treatment was given, the team returned via Garganta, arriving mere hours ago. The one receiving this information sighed, reluctantly settling back on his chair as he gazed to the side to look beyond the First Division barracks and to the never-ending buildings that made up Seoul society and getting high attention away from his white-haired lieutenant, pinching the bridge of his nose as he turned back to look at his subordinate once more. And where is the team along with the team leader that should be here doing what you are doing? The team is currently in 4th Division and is awaiting clearance from Unohana Taicho to leave the health ward and go back to normal activities. As for why I'm here instead of Shiba Taicho would be because. Number 21 hash. What do you mean you can't grow your arm back? Well, I kinda depleted all my Ryutsu reserves in that last attack and I don't have enough to boot up my instant regeneration, so I'll have to stay like this until my Ryutsu returns to a stable level. But you have a frickin' ocean of Ryutsu. That doesn't make sense. And that just shows how close I came to dying, which I didn't do, so don't look at me like that, Rooks. The raven-haired midget just glared at his fiancée with the deadliest face she could muster. Hopping to gain some sort of uncomfortable reaction from the orange head since he had done something stupid and she wanted to punish him but was currently unable to hit him thanks to the fact that he was lying on a bed in the 4th Squad barracks, not really injured if you didn't count the lack of a left arm but still having to be still since the lack if Ryutsu did some stupid things to your mobility and concentration, almost like if you were dehydrated. She was rather glad that her glare had succeeded in doing its job once the Shiba head started to squirm in his place, enjoying rather thoroughly the idea of being his only weakness since it looked as if nothing else unnerved him, and at the same time already thinking of all the things she could do with this newfound information. Maybe she would ask for that new Chappie t-shirt she saw in the Chappie store last time she went. But anyway, back to her idiot of a strawberry that looked a little bit too pale for her licking but still looked as strong as ever. She decided to finally get that explanation she had not heard since she had practically jumped him the moment she saw him, and not letting Ichigo so much as warn her of his lack of an arm to support them both. So, why do you not have an arm? Ichigo on the other hand just looked rather ashamed, almost as if he was thinking back to that moment and thinking it was rather stupid even if he knew it was basically the only way to win over the bastard's ability. He lifted an arm to rub sheepishly the back of his head as he looked anywhere but his soon-to-be wife while trying to explain the best he would and not sound stupid at the same time. Well, Berrigan has this thing on his skin so as to say that protects him of his own ability, but, well, he isn't protected from the inside, and if you found a way to get his own respire inside the guy, well, he would die. The 5th Squad captain turned to look at the raven head to see if she was following so far, only to quickly avert his amber gaze as he saw that understanding look in her violet eyes accompanied with worry. He didn't deserve such look, damn it. So Hachi, one of the big shots that disappeared 110 years ago, that was also one of my teachers, taught me a way to take that guy down. He actually told me in my past how he had defeated him, and well, I used the same tactic. The team distracted Berrigan while I let my arm rot as I deactivated my regeneration, letting it get eaten enough so that I could transport it into the guy's body, and well, that's how I lost my arm. Rukia let out a giant sigh as she stood from her place on the chair and went forward to hug Ichigo's lying form, wanting more than anything to make sure Ichigo was still there with head, but wanting the man to understand that she understood and that she was just worried from the lack of arm and the injuries everyone came back with. They were not easing her in any way. Okay, just don't do that again. It puts me on edge and I don't like it. The orange head just lifted an arm to embrace her in a half hug as best as he could, as he was trying not to move and evade the dizziness and the blood that would surely come out of his arm if he moved around much, giving a soft smile as he tried to convey his next words and at the same time not worry her further. I'll try. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.